first one, of the 5th of October. And I just want to get some help with a timeline.
Wait, which?
This is your first statement, dated 5th of October. It's a short one.
Page
0.
I'm sorry.
444?
Yes.
440.
It's on the screen, actually, if that's any easier.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Before we go to it, I want to ask you, you've given us some times in both witness statements. Those are timelines that you have extracted from memory as best as you can?
From what I can remember.
Right, so
Can you make sure you move the microphone across a little bit if you're going to be turning your head that far over? That's it.
so you accept that there may be errors in some of the timelines?
Could be.
Yeah, okay. I want to suggest something to you. Well, my instructions are that Mr. Piper actually arrived at Paria on the Friday at 4:55 p.m., right? And there's discussion in your statement at paragraph 10 about going to shore to meet with Mr. Piper, but the boat had to turn back.
With Mr. Ali?
You say this at paragraph 10. The third sentence, we were on Paria's boat heading ashore when Dexter messaged from the barge that they were hearing knocking noises coming from the chamber. We turned around to return to the berth. All right? Now, immediately before that, you're talking, you say Mr. Ali left for shore to secure additional resources at approximately 15:40 hours, so that's 3:40. About 20 minutes later, so that's 4 p.m., I was actioning the rescue plan. I was told that I had to go ashore to a meeting with Mr. Piper. Now, in fairness to you, you don't actually fix a time there. But what I would like to suggest to you is that you weren't actually summoned to go to shore to meet with Mr. Piper until after 5 p.m., shortly after 5 p.m.
No. I was before, but I didn't want to leave the site.
Okay.
No, you're going to have to do better with the microphone, please.
Oh,
if
sorry.
necessary, just move the whole thing over a little bit further. That's it. Move your pen out the way and pull that. That's it. You've got it. Right. So I think you said no. That's not correct. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Right.
Just so we can be clear, because Mr. Piper will come and give evidence, who do you say summoned you to go to meet with Mr. Piper? Do you recall?
Pardon?
Do you recall the name of the person who told you you had to go to meet with Mr. Piper?
I remember Dexter coming to me and telling me that Colin Piper requested for me to come ashore to meet with him.
I see. So that's just based on what Dexter said to you. Nobody from Paria told you directly that you had to come to shore to meet with Mr. Piper.
Someone from Paria, but I can't recall their name. I can't.
Okay, and you can't recall the time they
No.
told you. Okay, that's fine. Now, there was a toolbox meeting held on the 25th of February. We've heard evidence from other witnesses about it. But as I read your statement, you tell us you were at that toolbox meeting, yes?
Correct.
You say it happened at 8:30, but can that be an error? Because from what we've seen, the documents suggest the meeting was held at 9:15 and another one held at 9:30.
Yeah, it could be an error.
Yeah, okay, all right. Now, at that meeting, am I right that your primary concern would have really been diving operations?
Yeah.
Yeah? And do you say somewhere in your statement, I believe, that there was a general safety discussion with respect to scope of works for that day? Right? Would it be fairly accurate to say that the discussion at that meeting was very general in nature, very high level? Correct. Yes? And I want to suggest to you, because some witnesses, witnesses have given this evidence, but that there was no discussion about the removal of the plugs on that day at the meeting.
Nothing, right?
Is that correct? Would you accept that?
No.
Okay, so your evidence is that there was discussion about that.
Correct.
Okay, and I'm suggesting to you that that is not in fact the case, that there was no discussion about it on that day. Yes?
If that's your suggestion, yeah.
Right. Okay. You don't treat with that item specifically in your witness statement, do you? In either of them?
No.
Okay. So you're telling us, at least today for the first time, that that's the case. You accept that?
Telling you.
You're telling us today,
Right.
that that's the first time, or today rather, is the first time that you've actually said that there was a discussion.
That there was, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. The last area I want to take you to concerns the events of Sunday, the 27th of February. Now you deal with this issue at paragraphs 60.
I think before you move on, in fairness, Mr. Mutu, he does raise it, might be slightly ambiguous, but he does raise the issue of a discussion in relation to the removal of the riser. If you go to paragraph 15 of his supplementary statement, he sets out what the job scope was for the 25th of February. And then at 17, he says, at the toolbox, all the persons involved in the entire job gathered on the barge. The meeting was conducted by Mr. Dill Paul. We discussed the job scope for the day. Whoever had any concerns or questions had a chance to discuss. There was general safety discussion with the scope works for that day. I cannot recall which Paria persons were present at the toolbox meeting. As I say, I accept it might be slightly ambiguous, but to say there was no mention of it at all is probably not entirely fair. You could perhaps ask him if that's what he meant by it.
No, I accept the correction. I accept the correction.
Thanks.
Now, on the events of Sunday, the 27th, you deal with that at paragraph 60 to 67 of your witness statement. Now, you talk about 2 meetings having occurred on that day. You recall?
Yep.
Yeah. I want to suggest to you that by the time you went to the first meeting, well, let me ask you this. By the time you went to the first meeting, I imagine you had spoken to Kazim Ali Sr. extensively about the incident in general and about rescue plans. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And at the time that you both went to that meeting, the first meeting on Sunday, I want to suggest to you that LMCS's attitude was that by that time the divers had already been lost.
Not true.
Okay. Now you talk about having been asked at the first meeting to go back and do a method statement and risk assessment for rescue operation. Yes?
Yeah, correct.
I want to take you to look at the submissions bundle, which is at page 1067 of that bundle. I'm working off the electronic version. 6, 7. I think I have one. I think it's 10167. Forgive me. Can that be right? I'm not sure that I have the right. I'm not sure that I have the right. I've been given the right reference. Can I have one moment, please?
Might be able to help you.
I'm looking for the email of the 27th of February.
Yes, we did look at that already once. It's on the screen now.
Yes.
What is the page number? That is 10167. We really have that many pages in this.
It's bundle of submissions. Okay, right. So I was right.
Yes, I'm sorry. Please
Thank you.
proceed.
Thank you. Have you seen this email before?
No.
Okay. You won't dispute that it's an email from Mr. Kazim Ali to Mr. Paul Yearwood, sent on the 27th of February at 2:20 p.m., right?
Correct.
And this email was after you had the first meeting on the morning.
Correct.
Yes? And this is this email follows what you say was a discussion about a method, the need for a method statement and a risk assessment for a rescue operation. Yes? And if I ask the operator if they could just go down the screen a bit, you will see, you should see, it's not on this document. Stop. Oh, sorry, the email, the body of the email itself says, see attached documents for the above caption job. They are the method statement, risk assessment, and emergency response plan. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So this would have been an email following the request for these documents earlier on in the day. Okay. I want to take you now to 10200. So 10,200 of that bundle. One 10200. It's a document you would have seen previously, Commissioner. So, Mr. Farah, I'm suggesting to you that this is the method statement. This is LMCS's method statement, in fact, prepared by you, which accompanied the email on that day. Have a look at it.
Yeah.
This is document prepared by you?
Correct.
All right. And the top of that method statement talks about entry into the riser pipeline to retrieve 3 scuba tanks.
Correct.
Yes?
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting to you that this method statement, as outlined there, is really about the retrieval of equipment, not divers.
Correct.
Yes? Okay, good. And similarly, the risk assessment which was done is at page 10198 of that bundle. You were involved in the preparation of this risk assessment?
Correct.
And this, I'm suggesting to you that this risk assessment was also the risk assessment that accompanied the email.
Correct.
And this risk assessment, I'm suggesting to you that when you look at it, is essentially about a risk assessment to retrieve equipment, not divers.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay. Are you seeing anything in this document that expressly speaks about the rescue of divers? I'm suggesting to you, actually, that nothing in the document deals with specifically the rescue of divers.
At that point in time,
No.
Paria.
I'm not asking about that point in time. I'm asking about the document.
Could you repeat the question?
There's nothing in this document that expressly treats with the rescue of divers.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Can you direct us to what portion of the document you're looking at?
Well, it gives you the risk assessment based on a diving operation.
No, I'm not saying it's on a diving operation. We just looked at the method statement.
Right.
The method statement dealt with the retrieval of equipment, right? That plan to retrieve equipment involved the utilization of divers to go and retrieve the equipment.
Correct.
Good. I'm suggesting to you that this is a risk assessment which accompanies that method statement.
Correct.
Right. And I'm also suggesting to you that this risk assessment is a risk assessment done in relation to that method statement.
Correct.
Good. And therefore, it is not a risk assessment treating with the retrieval of the divers or the rescue of the divers. That's a better word.
Because at that point in time...
Mr. Farrar, I'm not asking about the time. I'm asking about the... Will you accept? If you don't want to accept it, that's fine.
I don't accept it.
Okay, good.
But I'd like to hear what he has to say about that. What do you say, Liz?
So at that point in time, Paria's main concern for us not to dive in the pipeline was because there was obstructions in the pipeline. So they told us to do a risk assessment and methodology to retrieve the bottles that were obstructed us from doing the dive, which is what we did.
For what purpose?
So they can then send down a camera that would be able to travel further than the obstructions that they encountered the day before.
So, so what Mr. Mutu is saying is right. This is not to do with rescuing divers specifically.
Correct.
You weren't going to be pulling out a diver. But let me understand this. What you were doing is providing a risk assessment and a program for retrieval of 3 scuba tanks.
Correct.
Yes. Are we to take it then that if you encountered a person down there, you would leave them there?
No.
Right. So, so that I'm clear, the 3 scuba tanks were the obstruction for a camera to be able to go further into the pipe.
Correct.
You provided this assessment to send divers into the pipe to try and retrieve bottles.
Correct.
Yes. Well, I don't suppose they're particularly expensive, those bottles, so it can't be for the value in the bottle. And it was in order to provide access to the pipe.
Correct.
Either by camera or perhaps later on, if somebody was still alive, a person.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
I want to suggest to you that by the time this risk assessment was done and sent, the purpose of retrieving this equipment was because LMCS and Paria were of the view at that time that the lives had been lost. That's the first thing I want to suggest to you.
Right. Well, let him answer that
Yes.
first.
Yes?
No, definitely not.
Can I be clear, please,
Yes.
Mr. Mutu? Is the suggestion that Paria were prepared to allow divers to go into the pipe to retrieve bottles, but not men?
Correct.
You're saying that your instructions are that this assessment was designed to allow men to go in this pipe to retrieve 3 bottles.
My instructions are that LMCS was repeatedly, at that point in time, asking for permission to go into the pipe because, 1, they were of the view that lives had been lost, and 2, that the bodies had to be retrieved, and in order to retrieve those bodies in a humane manner, the obstructions had to be removed. And Kazim Ali was of that view. And in fact, on the evidence, on the audio evidence, which is before the commission, he says that. And Paria's position is not that they were sending men into the pipe, but Paria's position is that at all times it was open to entertaining any risk assessment or any plan that anyone had in relation to the pipe. But they were not prepared to allow anyone to go in there in a way which was unsafe.
Right.
So they were open to hearing all possibilities, but they wanted it properly documented.
I think I understand you.
Yes.
What you're saying is that whether then or at any other time, whether to retrieve scuba tanks or anything else, they wanted this sort of documentation risk assessment and method statement in advance?
At minimum, yes.
As a minimum?
Yes.
Right. And you say that the purpose of this was in order to retrieve scuba tanks. Was this done at your client's behest? No. This is being done at Mr. Kazim Ali's behest.
Yes.
Is it? Right.
They had an earlier meeting in the day. As you will appreciate, events had moved on significantly since Friday. Persons were concerned about their lives being lost, and Paria was very concerned at that time to try and be as humane as they could have been in this circumstance.
Right. Well, you can make a speech later on, but what I do want to understand about this, though, the Paria were prepared to entertain a diver or divers going into the pipe on Sunday to retrieve a number of bottles so that wouldn't interfere with the bodies that they believed were now dead being removed from the pipe, being damaged in any way.
I think that's a subset of the general position, which is Paria at all times was prepared to entertain persons going into the pipe, provided that it could be shown that it could be done in a safe manner, for whatever purpose.
And do you have instructions as to whether or not this was regarded as safe?
No, I don't, but I can take instructions.
Helpful to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So coming back to, and this is the last aspect of your evidence I want to deal with. I want to suggest to you that when you say at paragraph 62 of your witness statement that Paria wanted LMCS to do a method statement and a risk assessment for a rescue operation, that is incorrect, because that's not what LMCS was contemplating at the time. You're free to reject it.
I reject.
Good.
What did you say?
He rejects it.
You reject it.
Yes. So I have no further questions for this witness. Thank you, Mr. Farah.
Thank you, Mr. Mutu. Ms. Prasad Miraj. Is it Miraj or Maharaj?
Miraj, please.
Miraj. I thought so. Everyone kept telling me it was Maharaj, but it's Miraj, isn't it?
Everyone else is wrong.
And I'm blaming everybody else anyway. Right. Okay, so it's Prasad Miraj.
Yes,
okay.
please. Mr. Farah, I'll take you back to paragraph 60 of your witness statement.
The supplementary or the original?
Yes.
The supplementary.
Right. In that paragraph, this is in relation to the meeting on the 27th of
Can't hear you.
This is in relation to the meeting on the 27th of February, Sunday the 27th of February. At paragraph 60, confirm that the purpose, this is what you have. Can you kindly confirm that the purpose of the meeting was to tell them being Paria, of our plan and convince them at least give us one chance to make a rescue attempt? So just for clarification in relation to the meetings and the preparation of the documentation that followed the first meeting, what was your understanding of your intention in relation to the meeting that you attended?
To convince them to do a rescue.
Right. But then you prepared documents in relation to retrieval of bottles. Can you explain why that came to be?
Yeah, I believe they would have told us that we could not do the rescue because they were unsure of the conditions in the pipeline, and the only way for them to reach further past the bottles were to get them removed. So they asked us to do a dive plan to retrieve the bottles from the pipeline.
Great. So I'd just like to ask you a few things to clarify what you've said earlier. You were the dive supervisor in relation to this project.
Correct.
On the 25th. There was another supervisor for the works on the 25th at Bird 6?
Correct.
And that would have been Kazim Ali Jr.?
Correct.
In answer to questions posed to you, said it was unfortunate that he was in the chamber at the time of the incident? Just for clarification, you've already have it in your statement. Just for clarification, can you explain what you mean by that so that we understand it? Was he always in the chamber?
No. He was
Where
not.
was he stationed?
Alongside the barge.
All right, so he wasn't
As a-
always
no.
in the chamber with the men. And in relation to best practice, you have agreed with Ms. Alfonso that it may have been best practice to have a harness with the extension at topside. You recall that?
Yeah.
Right. Now, not in relation to best practice, but in relation to what actually occurred on the day in question, the Delta P as we now know it to be. Would you accept that that would have been best practice at that time of that incident?
No.
Could you care to explain in your words why that would not have been?
Well, if they had a tagline attached to them that could have got caught up on their neck while they were making their way into the pipeline and could have resulted in
Further danger.
further injury.
All right. I think that's all, please, Mr. Commissioner.
Well, I'm afraid I have a few questions for you. Can I deal, first of all, with a question asked by Mr. Piggis? He's the gentleman sitting in the middle there. And you remember he took you to the document that is the scope of works and took you to a number of different sections in that and inviting you to say it was LMCS's responsibility to supervise the works. And I don't think there's any dispute that it was your responsibility to supervise the works. I want to understand if anybody else had any similar responsibilities. All right, so can I, and a couple of other things as well, but can I just ask you to have that document, please? It's at page 558 of the bundle. And I want to ask you, please, to look first of all at paragraph 3.1.12 and 3.1.21. So those two. Let's look at 12 first, because I want to ask you about it. This is describing the works that were to be carried out as drafted by Paria, correct?
Correct.
It says there, cut, insert migration barrier and install a 30-inch flange onto the existing line. Inspection requirement for the flange, 100% PT, including route passes, VT, and hydro test. I don't pretend to understand half of that, but it probably doesn't matter for my purposes. What it says after that is this. Note, video stream to be provided topside during work activity for Paria's representative. Did you provide such a video stream during the work activity for Paria's representative?
We did.
You did. Did they avail themselves of it?
They did.
Over at paragraph 3.1.21, the contractor, that's you, yes, shall supply video footage during the subsea works. That's what you were doing on that day, subsea works.
Correct.
And this video must form part of the handover package. Did you understand that?
No, that was not my part of the job.
No, but you understood that it needed to be recorded.
No.
You didn't? And that's what it says, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't hand over a video package at the end of the job if you haven't recorded it.
No, I was never told to record it.
Nobody ever told you that?
No.
Nobody at LMCS?
No.
Or at Paria?
Not even. No.
Anyone?
No.
So you didn't?
No.
Could you have?
Yeah.
Paragraph 4, please. Page 570. Mr. Peggers asked you if there was any obligation on Paria to, if you could find anywhere in the document, any obligation on Paria to, as it were, supervise or monitor in any way. Can I just ask you to have a look at 4.1, please? Supply personnel for organising all work permits and certificates, monitoring contractors' performance and work standards. How did you understand that Paria would monitor contractors' performance and work standards?
They would be on site and supervising the job.
Or looking at it, at least.
Yeah, correct.
How else would they know? Who was doing that?
They had, as I said, they had a couple guys from Paria, Kenson, that were on the berth, that were popping by and looking at the video from time to time, but I can't recall who they are or what positions they hold in the company.
To carry on that paragraph, it says approving work done by the contractor. So they had to approve the work you've done and carrying out quality assurance audits. Right. Yes. Right. I don't think I need to trouble you with any more of that. Now, I do want to ask you a little about what Mr. Mutu was asking you, because you'll recall that he took you through a litany of potential problems that you, or he was suggesting you, might not have considered when assessing whether there was a proper plan to rescue these men. You remember he was asking you a number of questions before we had our lunch break, all right? And I want to ask you a little about that, because he sought to confine your the questions about that to the first plan that you had, all right? And I'm going to call it Plan 1, 2, and 3, so that I have a clear understanding of what you're saying, all right? Plan 1 was, is set out at paragraph 26 of your statement. So can we have that up, please? Plan 1, the rescue plan which we devised was that A, I was going to enter into the riser with an extra set of diving gear so that if I found anyone, I could provide it to them to assist them to take them back up. Yes? B, I would have I would have had connected to me a tagline which I would have used to communicate with topside in the habitat, Dexter, who would assist to pull me back up to the riser. I would enter feet first. All right? Now, can I just understand what was happening? This is pre-Boudram.
Pre, yeah.
So at this stage, did you know whether the men were in the pipe or not?
I had a fair idea that they were.
Well, that's why I ask you, did you know? You didn't know, did you?
No.
No. You suspected?
Suspected.
Or believed, or some other such adjective, but you couldn't have known for sure. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. Were you, nonetheless, prepared to risk your own life to see if they were in there?
I was.
Did you understand that that was a significant risk?
I do.
Especially, as has been pointed out to you very fairly by Mr. Mutu, that there were a number of issues which either you didn't consider or ignored. Do you agree?
Possibly. But at that time...
Almost certainly, isn't it?
I was willing to go and attempt a rescue.
Yes. All right. Well, you could perhaps understand why you weren't wholeheartedly welcomed in attempting such a rescue by those who are responsible for the site. You can understand that, can't you?
Completely.
All right. That's coupled with the fact that when you were first seen after this, almost immediately after it had happened, you were yourself distraught, weren't you? You were laying flat on your back on the barge with your hands over your head, clearly upset.
Correct.
Was that born of the fact that you thought they may have died?
Correct.
And how close were these men to you?
Very close.
So perhaps we can all understand why you might have been a little distraught. But What I want to ask you is whether any of the matters that have been identified by Mr. Mutu in his examination of you were considered later. Do you follow me? There were 2 other plans that you formulated when other divers had arrived, were there not?
Yep, correct.
In your plan number 2, which is set out in your paragraph 37 and 38, this is now post Boudram coming out, all right? So the plan changed. First of all, can I ask you this? When Mr. Boudram came out of the pipe, did that change your attitude? Bearing in mind it's now 2+ hours, 2.5 hours after they first disappeared. Did it change people's attitude about whether they were still alive or not?
It did, yeah.
Did it or didn't it?
It did.
Yes. Did it give you new hope?
Definitely.
Did you collect yourself by then? Were you less distraught?
I was, yeah.
Right. Now, in effecting a plan number 2, were there other divers present?
There were, yeah.
Did Mr. Conan Beddoe arrive?
He did.
Who is Conan Beddoe?
He is a commercial diver that I work with as well.
Commercial diver like you, or better qualified than
Well,
you?
he is a saturation qualified diver,
I don't know what saturation qualified diver means. What does that mean?
where you live in a chamber and
You're
then
permanently under pressure.
yeah.
Right, so that you can go from one job to the next without having to come back to the surface, or
Correct.
at surface pressure anyway. All right. So he, would you say, was as experienced as it gets?
He was.
Yes or no?
Yeah. Yes,
Did you have confidence in him?
I did.
Did Mr. Kazim Ali have confidence in him?
He did.
Was he prepared when he arrived to help?
He was.
What did he say? What was the approach taken by him with you?
Well, I explained to him what happened, and he then told me that he would go into the chamber to make his own assessment, along with Michael and Raleigh.
Who's Ronald
Ramuta.
Ramuta? And who's he?
He is another diver,
Qualified diver?
qualified. Yeah,
Like you?
commercial- Yeah,
Commercial diver?
commercial diver.
Good diver? You
Very
know
good,
him?
Yep,
Have you dived with him?
many times before.
As good as you? Better than you?
Better than me.
Right. Did you have confidence in him?
I did.
Did you formulate a plan between him and Mr. Beddoe,
We did, yep.
built around your original plan or
Yeah,
changed?
No, same plan, using scuba, except Conan would have been going into the pipeline.
Right. So you're not now going to go into the pipeline. Dexter's no longer involved, is he?
He was on the top side.
Right.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually effecting a rescue, who was it going to involve this time?
It would have been Conan, Michael, Ronald, Corey, and myself.
5 divers.
5.
Who were going to be standbys?
Conan would have been in the pipeline, Michael, Corey, and Ronald would have been standby.
And what would you have been doing?
I would have been on the top supervising.
Right. So that was a plan that you formulated, and it still necessitated using scuba equipment. Is that right?
Yep.
You say he went and made an assessment of his own. That's Mr. Beddoe.
Yeah.
At that time, you'd obviously learnt what you could from Mr. Boudram. Had Michael Kurban been into the pipe?
He was. Yeah.
Sorry?
He was in the pipeline.
So did he come back and tell you anything that he had learnt from being in the pipeline?
No, he just told me that he went down and he reached maybe about 10 feet past the elbow, and he retrieved one dive tank.
What was he using when he went down?
He was using the hooker connected to a scuba tank.
A hooker. That's a long tube
right.
with the ordinary mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Yes? So free into the mouth, not part of a mask, free into the mouth, is that right?
Correct.
And so he went down with a tube that was connected ultimately to a tank or some other air source.
Correct.
At the surface?
Yeah. In the chamber.
In the chamber.
Yeah.
And he went down, so he was able to tell you conditions inside the pipe?
Yeah.
And to tell Mr. Beddoe conditions inside the pipe?
Correct.
So you were asked a number of questions about what might or might not have been considered by you. By then, had you considered whether the accident was a Delta P or not? By this time, this second plan?
Yeah.
Yes? Did you discuss it at all with Mr. Beddoe?
I did.
And what was his view about it?
Well, I explained to him that in order for the chamber to blow back down, that everything should have been equalized and that it should not occur again.
What was his view?
He said, all right. He was willing to enter the pipe.
If you had, given that you now had considered Delta P as being the cause, did it enter your minds at all that there might be some potential latent Delta P still in existence?
At that point in time, no.
Because you thought it had equalized?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
You were asked about oil. And that would affect both toxicity and visibility, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Mr. Boudram had been in the pipe for how long?
I believe maybe close to 2 hours.
Yes, I think perhaps a little more, but there or thereabouts. Did he have a mask when he came out?
No.
And did he have any mouthpiece when he came out?
No.
He was covered in oil.
Covered in oil.
And were you able to ascertain from Michael Kerban, who had been down to the elbow and some 10 feet or so past it, as to what the visibility was like?
He said it was water. He had visibility.
He had visibility.
Yeah.
Of course, you could have torches. Did you have torches?
We did.
There were, we're told, scuba tanks in the actual pipeline itself. We know that there were. Did you regard that as being a problem in terms of rescue by the time you were taking this second dive?
No.
Did you consider it even?
No.
No. Did Mr. Boudram come out with a tank?
He came up with a tank, but I believe when Raleigh pulled him out, he would have left the tank in the pipeline.
Did Michael Kerban come out with a tank?
He came out with a tank, yeah.
He brought one out, did he?
Brought one out.
Given that you've got a 30-inch pipe, I mean, you say you can turn around in it. I think I might quite like to see that. But in a 30-inch pipe, would it be possible to get past the tank?
Definitely.
Did you consider whether the tanks might have provided a life source for those that were in the pipe?
It could have, yeah.
You were asked whether you considered the inflatable plug. Did you know where the plug was before the accident happened?
Before, yeah.
Right. And if you had considered Delta P to be the problem that had caused this, where would the plug be? Which side of the people would the plug be?
Below.
Below or past them?
Oh,
Would the plug be between you, at the riser 6, and the people that were down there, or the other side of them?
You're talking about after the
After the
incident?
accident, yes.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Where would the plug be?
In front
Of them?
of them.
Yeah. But not between you and them?
No.
Did you consider that?
No, I knew that the plug would have been the first thing to enter the pipeline.
You knew that?
I knew that.
All right. Apparently, there was a cable attached to it. Did that cause you any concern that there might be a cable attached to it and that you might be, as Mr. Mutu puts it, snagged by it or caught up in it in some way?
No.
Did you even consider it?
No.
And you consider it now, would you please? Would that stop you going into effect a rescue?
Definitely
that
not.
existed as a possibility?
It would not stop me.
Do you think it should?
No.
He asked you also to consider the mental state of the divers who were in the pipe. And the first thing I want to ask you is this, is how long have they been diving, these men?
Over 10 years.
Experienced divers?
Yeah.
Do you have any training at all, even in the most basic forms of PADI training, what to do if there is an emergency underwater, breathing shallowly, taking not too rapid breaths, things of that kind? Is there a sort of understanding or training about that?
Yeah.
There is?
Well, if once you do your PADI course, you would learn
even the basic PADI course?
What to do and what not to do as a diver.
And whilst they may not be exactly happy about being down there, did you think that it was likely to be a problem? And it's not an unfair point that Mr. Mutu makes, is it? That they might be a bit panicky, thinking they're stuck in a pipe.
They would be.
And I want to ask you in respect to that, you had, I think, formulated in your mind that you were going to go in feet first. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you know which way they were in the pipe?
Yeah, I do.
How?
From Christopher.
Right. What had he told you about that?
He told me that they were all making their way back toward, well, at that point in time, he wasn't sure which direction they were going, but he said that he was dragging, I believe it was Kazim Jr.
We've heard it as a chain, he described. Did he tell you that? Or did you know that?
No, he didn't tell me that there was a chain, but he told me that all of them were making their way back towards the elbow.
Because if you go in feet first and the others were in the pipe head first, you'd only touch feet to feet, wouldn't you?
You would.
That would be a problem, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Did you consider that?
At that point in time, no.
All right. The seventh point he made to you was that this was a confined space. Well, a pipe is a confined space. Was that a problem as far as you were concerned?
No.
Or indeed any of the other divers who were offering to go into the pipe?
No, it wasn't a problem.
He asked you, before I interrupted him, whether there was any means of verbal communication. And at that stage, this is now Plan 2. Were there any facilities at Plan 2 for verbal communication? There's a third plan, when I think people did arrive with such equipment, but not at that stage.
No.
Am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
So if you were to formulate this Plan 2 with Mr. Beddoe and others, how were you going to communicate with each other? Did you work out how you would communicate with each other once somebody went into that pipe?
Tagline.
A tagline?
Yeah.
Various pulls?
Yeah.
Had you described to each other what one pull would mean, or two, or three?
Yeah.
Had you worked that out?
Yep.
Between you?
Yeah.
And was everybody happy with that arrangement?
They were.
Right. The next arrangement or issue that he raised was poor visibility. Well, of course, it would have been not ideal, would it? Right. Although you knew someone had come out the pipe and you knew that Mr. Kerban had gone into it. Did you have torches, as I think you told me you already did?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Well, obviously, oil can impair visibility, but you would have had masks, wouldn't you?
Correct.
He asked you something about fatigue management, but since I don't know what it is, I'm not going to ask you about it either. But I imagine it's becoming exhausted or something of that kind. I'll simply ask you about adrenaline. Is that something that might have kicked in?
Definitely.
Yeah, all right. We've taken a little time, and forgive me for doing so, because Mr. Mutu also took some time, and I want to say, not unreasonably, questioning the things that you should and properly ought to have considered, and no doubt which others were considering. What I want to know from you, please, is if you had had to put all of those matters in some sort of writing and address them in some sort of way, by way of a risk assessment, how long would that take you to do?
Very long.
Did you regard the position that you were in when Mr. Boudram came out of that pipe as being something which you had to act with a degree of speed, if not haste?
I do.
Why?
Well, we had divers trapped in a pipeline. They did not have they were a limited amount of air. So
Did you have any idea how much air they had?
No.
Was time, therefore, of the essence?
Definitely.
After you had formulated this new plan with Mr. Beddoe, post Mr. Boudram coming out of the pipe, was that plan conveyed to anybody at Paria?
I can't recall.
Well, you didn't anyway.
We were already in the water.
No, I appreciate it, but you didn't.
No.
No, all right. When you were in the water, as you say, about to effect this plan, was it just you in the water, or were there others?
No, I was on the boat.
Right. They were in the water.
They were in the water.
Who's they?
Conan, Michael,
Mr. Beddoe, Michael Kerban,
Raleigh.
And Raleigh. Do you know his surname?
Which one?
Raleigh. Ramdahan.
Ramuta,
yeah. Right. So the three of them were already in the water, were they?
They were.
And what happened when they were in the water about to effect this plan?
At that point in time, the Coast Guard came to me and requested that I get the divers out of the water.
You need to speak a little closer to that microphone. The Coast Guard came to you. Can you remember who it was?
No.
Anyway, a Coast Guard,
yeah.
said to you what?
That I need to get the divers out of the water.
You needed to get them out of the water.
Yeah.
Why did he say that? Did you ask him why?
At that point in time, he said that he received instructions from Paria to get all the divers out of the water.
He told you that he had received instructions from Paria. You hadn't received any such instructions from Paria.
Yeah, I did.
At that time?
Yeah, at that time.
Who?
But I disobeyed.
From whom?
Can't recall exactly.
Well, there was a lady on the barge and a gentleman, wasn't there?
Catherine was there, but I'm not sure if she was there at that point in time. I can't recall.
So it wasn't her?
I can't recall.
All right. Well, anyway, somebody you said. But
somebody.
Who was the first person to say to you, take the divers or get the divers out of the water?
Paria personnel.
Paria personnel. What did the Coast Guard say?
At that point in time?
Yes.
Nothing. They weren't.
All right, you've got me a little confused now, because I thought you said to me that the three of the men were in the water, about to effect the plan.
When you said the first time, I'm talking about this was from plan.
This is plan number 2 we're on.
Okay,
right?
plan number 2.
Mr. Mutu was asking you all about plan number 1. I'm asking you about plan number 2. All right? And these three men, Beddoe, Raleigh, and Michael, were in the water, about to effect plan number 2 that you've described to us. All right?
Okay.
And I thought you said that the Coast Guard had asked you to ask them to get out of the water.
For plan number 2, it was the Coast Guard.
Right. So let's just stick with that. The Coast Guard asked you to get them out of the water, not Paria.
Not Paria.
Right. So, and did you ask them why?
I did.
What did he say?
He said that he received instructions that they had to get us out of the water, and I asked him why. He said that he couldn't tell me exactly why. At that point in time, you had to come out of the water.
Did you tell them that were in the water to come out?
I did.
Were they all above surface, or
they
were some
in the chamber?
They were already in the chamber. How were you able to tell them?
I sent Corey. Corey was at the surface of the water. So I instructed him to go and tell the divers that they
Corey was at the surface, in the water, but on the surface. All right. And did they come out?
They did.
A little while later, a further or a number of other divers arrived. I want to have some sort of idea, please, of timing. So this plan number 2, when this was happening, these men were in the water about to effect it, and the Coast Guard's telling them to get out of the water, and they do. What sort of time was that? And do it by how long it was after Mr. Boudram came out.
I think it might have been between 6 o'clock and 6:30.
Right.
Yeah.
So some hours anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Plan number 3, that was formulated according to your evidence when a man by the name of
Conrad.
Conran, he arrived, did he? Who's he?
He is another commercial diver.
Experienced commercial diver?
Very experienced.
Better than you?
Better than me.
Did he arrive with additional equipment?
He did.
And did this equipment include the sort of equipment that Mr. Mutu was asking about, verbal communication equipment?
It did.
So that divers could now go in with commercial diving equipment into the pipe and be able to speak to those on the surface?
Correct.
Did you tell anybody from Paria that you now had this capability?
Catherine.
You told Catherine. Did you ask her, did you make an adjustment, therefore, to the plan number 2 that you'd had to accommodate this new equipment?
We did.
Did the new equipment also include facial masks?
It did, yeah.
You wouldn't be able to talk otherwise, would you? It must be a complete mask over the face of a lightweight type that I think Miss Alfonso was trying to extract from you.
Well, it wouldn't have been lightweight, but...
It was a facial mask anyway, and so that you could communicate. And did that mask have a hose that was going to supply air from the surface?
It did.
How long was that hose?
300 feet.
300 feet. So it would have allowed anybody who was willing to have gone down by the 60 or 70 feet to the bottom and then along by some 200 odd feet. Yes?
Yeah.
Did you explain that to Miss Balkasoon?
I did.
And did you say that you had these experienced commercial divers willing to do it?
I did.
Were they willing to do it?
They were.
What was Miss Balkasoon's response?
That she had to receive instructions from Colin Piper.
Right. Did you get an impression whether she thought this might work?
I can't say.
All right. But in any event, she spoke to Mr. Piper. Do you know if she spoke to him or not?
I can't say.
Did she make a phone call?
Yeah, I'm sure she would have.
You didn't see her do it?
No.
Or hear what she was saying?
Oh, yeah.
All right. In any event, did there ever come a time, when you were permitted to effect any kind of rescue, given the number of people that you had there?
Yeah.
Did there ever come a time?
That we were permitted?
Yes.
No.
And was there something more that you would have liked to have had in an ideal world? Is there something more by way of equipment that you would have liked to have had in order to effect this rescue?
No.
Is there anything else that we could have had?
Nope.
Yes, thank you. Well, I recognise I've taken quite a bit of time dealing with those issues, and anybody else who wants to ask a question arising from that will be permitted to do so. Does anybody else want to? I see, Mr. Mutu, you have your light on. I'll come to you last if I may. Does anybody else wish to ask anything? No. Mr. Mutu, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you. The Commissioner's just asked you a series of questions, and you've given a series of answers. None of that is set out in any of your witness statements. Is that correct?
I can't say that right now.
Okay, to the best of your recollection.
To the best of my recollection.
It's not?
No.
Right. You, so I can understand this process. You submitted a first witness statement, and
can you raise your voice slightly,
yes.
Mr. Mutu, please?
After you submitted a first witness statement, you help me with this because I'm not sure. You came into the commission, and did you subject yourself to an interview process?
I did.
Yeah. And that process produced the second statement. How long was that process?
What, the interview itself?
Yes.
Maybe 2 to 3 hours.
Okay. And the information that's in your second witness statement, that's information that you volunteered when you came in, or it was a product of a question and answer?
Question
and answer sequence. And when you came in for that process, I imagine you were asked about the details of your various plans. Is that correct?
I can't recall.
But help me, if you can, the witness statement which came following that interview process is a witness statement in which you spoke extensively about the rescue plans. Am I right?
I believe so.
Yeah, because in the first one you didn't.
Right.
And in fact, as I read it, would you agree with me that a substantial part, if not the vast majority, of your second statement deals with the rescue plan, the development of the plans, and so on? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the exchange that you just had with the commissioner, all of those details, if they were in your mind at the time, would have been highly relevant to that statement. Would you agree?
I agree.
Would you agree with me that it's reasonable to expect that they would have found themselves into that statement?
Pardon?
Would you agree with me that it's not unreasonable to think that if those details were in your mind, you would have put them you would have put them in the statement?
I would have.
But notwithstanding that, you didn't.
I didn't.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. President.
Of course. Just a moment. Let me see if there's. I don't think anybody else. Miss Maharaj? No. All right. Yes, Mr. Maharaj.
In respect of what Mr. Muto asked the witness, I just want to get one question. In respect of the statement.
Of course.
I want you to look at the statement you gave to the Commission. It's at 443 in Volume 1. And I want you to look at from paragraph 34, page 448. And you would see that at paragraph 34, you stated that you told Michael that his dad was behind him and that to go and rescue him. At paragraph 35, I want you to follow me and see whether I'm saying what you said. And then you said at this time, Michael, Rolly, Corey went back to the habitat. And you recall Paria-LMCS person was saying not to dive. At that point in time, we knew that the guys were alive, so that we had to attempt a rescue. I discussed with Michael the rescue plan. The plan was the same as I described above, except that Michael would enter the pipeline. And then you went through the plan in that paragraph. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Look at it. And then at paragraph 37, you said at this point, Conan arrived, and I discussed the plan with Conan. Conan, Michael, Corey, and Rolly were going to execute the same rescue plan. We were on the boat. Paria-LMCS person were between the barge and the boat. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And then you went on. The divers entered the water from the small boat and entered the chamber. The Coast Guard officers came to me and told me that we had to stand down. They said that no one was allowed to dive and get the divers out, etc. See that? Then you said, Corey was on the surface. I told him to go down and tell the divers to stand down, that everyone has come back to the surface. See that paragraph? And then at around 6:30 p.m., Conrad arrived with all the surface supply equipment, which we brought onto the barge. The rescue plan was modified so that we would now enter with the commercial equipment. I remember there was a lady from Paria named Catherine who I was communicating with. I was trying to convince Catherine and whoever else was there from Paria, as they were all there together. I was trying to convince them for us to make at least one attempt to rescue. She said she was not in charge and kept telling me that she would relay my request to her superiors. I gave her the details of the rescue plan. Then in the next paragraph, I also tried to convince the Coast Guard. I don't remember the officers I spoke to. They just kept saying we couldn't dive and that we had to stand down until they received instructions. I kept going back to Catherine and kept saying that we don't have permission. Just stand down. She said they themselves had additional equipment coming down. She said that a camera was going to come in. It was back and forth with the Paria persons. Their position was to stand down. In addition to Conan's equipment, 2 other dive support vessels arrived, fully equipped with the same surface supply equipment which we had. They also had willing divers as well. I discussed the rescue plan with them. The main person to enter the pipeline would have been Conan.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, Mr.
Somebody has. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Maraj, but he said, I understood him to say that he had one question arising out of my question. Perhaps the misunderstanding is mine, but I'm not quite sure what's happening.
Well, we haven't had a question yet, that's for sure.
Well yes.
Very well. Look, I mean, if you're seeking to remind the witness of what he said previously in the light of what Mr. Mutu has put to him, which is not unreasonable, it seems to me not unfair either. One of the processes of this exercise is that witnesses don't get an opportunity to give their evidence in chief, so that they're reminded of their evidence in chief. I would encourage them all to read their statements before they come into this room, so that they are aware of what they said previously. But how much further are you going to go, Mr.?
Mr. Mutu was putting to the witness that he did not say these things before at the interview with the commission. That's right. And I was pointing out to the witness that what he said here is what he said to the commission in his statement.
Certainly in part, yes.
Yes.
All right, yeah. Well,
so I wouldn't be just a few more. I just want to point him out to the last 3 paragraphs. And at paragraph
last 3 paragraphs.
Yes. At paragraph 45, you said that Paria was aware that all the resources came in for the boats to enter the channel and make their way and tie off alongside the boat. And then paragraph 46, I had discussions with Catherine and the other Paria personnel present as to what resources were available to us. Colin Piper, whilst I was there, did not visit berth 6. And then at paragraph 47, no one from the management of Paria called me, etc., etc. Okay? So in your statement to the commission, you basically gave the 3 rescue plans. That's all?
Correct.
Yes, I think in fairness to Mr. Mutu, he was putting it that all the issues that he had asked in cross-examination were not raised by any of the question and answer session that took place. And I think that's the point he was trying to make.
At that time, we didn't have the benefit of Mr. Mutu.
You took the words out of my mouth. Of course, we didn't have the benefit of how perspicacious Mr. Mutu is in seeing this forward. But anyway, thank you very much. Mr. Farah, thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Wilson has.
Good afternoon, Mr. Farah. Thank you for coming. I heard you mention in your statement that surface supplied equipment come up. Do you have any recollection of the longest umbilical in any of the equipment that showed up on the site?
600 feet.
600 feet. And that was the longest?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farah. You are free to go. You can now stay if you like. You can now even watch the screen if you like. All right? But please don't discuss your evidence with anyone else, all right, that's yet to give evidence, please. Thank you. You're free to go.
Our next witness is Mr. Michael Kurban. And Mr. Bissesso.
Mr. Kurban is next. We may only be able to deal with Mr. Kurban, I think.
I,
Michael Coburn,
solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that the evidence
that the evidence
I shall give to the Commission
I shall give to the Commission
in this case
shall be the truth, the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Kerban, everybody here knows you lost your father. And you will be treated with courtesy and respect. I'll make sure of that, all right? I understand that this is not going to be easy for you, and I'm sure it's something you've lived with ever since that day. What we're going to do is it Mr. Bissessar?
Yes,
Mr. Bissessar is going to summarize the evidence that you've given to us so far, all right? That, I hope, will make it a little easier. Listen to him carefully, and if you agree with his summary of your evidence, that will serve as your evidence, all right? And then everybody else here will restrain themselves in asking you such questions as are vital for the purposes of our inquiry, and no more, all right? If you have any difficulty or you want to take a break or anything of that kind, you've only to raise your hand, ask me, and you will get it, all right? Do you understand? So please take your time. You've got some water in front of you. I know it's not going to be easy, but thank you for coming, all right?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Michael Coburn is a Marine captain and is certified commercial diver with his own diving company, and he also works with different companies. His father was Faisal Coburn, one of the deceased divers. Michael Coburn, following an interview with the legal team, gave a witness statement dated 31st October 2022. This is at WB 1601. He was represented by counsel during the interview. In his witness statement, Michael Coburn said that the facts in his witness statement were true and correct. Michael Coburn says that on 25th February 2022, around 3:30 p.m., his brother Nicholas Coburn called him and told him that there was an incident on berth 6. He spoke to Andrew Farrer, who believed that the divers were in the pipeline. Michael Coburn arrived at berth 6 with Corey Crawford and Ronald Ramuta, and Corey and Ronald went into the habitat and brought Christopher out of the pipeline. Christopher told him, that is Michael Coburn, that his father Faisal Coburn was right behind him, and Kazim and Yusuf were waiting for help. Christopher said to him to go and rescue them. Michael Coburn complains that Paria told him not to dive in the pipeline, but he responded that the men's lives were at risk, and Paria could not stop them from going to rescue the divers. He recalls that the Paria person told him that he was just telling him what management was saying. The Paria person said that he knew the situation and Mr. Coburn should do what he wants to do. Michael Coburn says that the Paria guys were in the office and were not seeing what was going on at the site. He said that he, Corey, Ronald, and Dexter Guerra formulated a new dive plan to go into the pipeline, and they assembled the dive equipment, and he then went into the habitat, and Corey and Ronald assisted him, holding on to the rope while he went into the pipeline feet first. He met one dive tank in the riser, which he pushed aside, and continued going down the riser, made the bend, and entered the horizontal for about 10 to 15 feet. Michael Coburn says it was completely dark in the pipeline, but he had his dive light with him, and with the exception of the tank he pushed away and another floating to the top of the riser, he did not see any other objects there. He heard pounding in the pipeline. He said no one was pounding from the outside because he, Corey, and Ronald made it clear, going in, that no one should pound. Michael Coburn explains that the entire length of the pipeline which he entered was full of water. He says that when he arrived at the airtime limit, he was approximately 10 to 15 feet in the horizontal, and he then came back. Michael Coburn's evidence is that he reported to Corey and Ronald what he saw when he came back, and everything was set up to go back into the water. He had commercial helmets connected to an umbilical, and Conan was willing to go into the pipeline with him, with Andrew and Conrad monitoring from the top. Michael Coburn says that Catherine Balkissoon told them that they were not allowed to go in the pipeline again because management was having a meeting and that Paria will make a decision and let them know. He remembers that the Coast Guard officers told him that the Coast Guard were there to make sure that they, meaning Michael Kurban and the divers, do not go back into the pipeline. Around 11 p.m. on Friday, Catherine Balkisoon told Michael Kurban and the divers that Paria had appointed Subsea Global to use their divers to bolt the riser back at berth 6 to equalize the water displacement in the pipe and to take off the cap on top of the riser at berth 5 as they wanted to bring a crawler camera to send into the pipeline. Michael Kurban says that the job to connect the riser was done at 12:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, and the crawler arrived at 3 a.m. and left at 5 a.m., but he was not allowed to see the footage. Michael Kurban recalls that Andrew Farah and Dexter Guerra told him that Paria wanted LMCS to have a permit for anything they wanted to do. Michael Kurban left Paria at about midday on Saturday, and he said nothing was happening. He tried to come back on Saturday, but Paria did not want him to come back on site, so he went to berth 6 with a friend's boat and stayed at berth 6 until night time. Michael Kurban says that on Sunday morning, while LMCS was trying to remove the habitat with a crane, the emergency brake on the crane failed and the habitat fell into the sea, after which Paria stopped all operations. On Sunday at about 7:46 a.m., Michael Kurban made an international broadcast on Channel 16 VHF radio from Sunnyday, which was the marine channel. He says he made the broadcast to explain what was taking place at Paria. Paria then told him not to broadcast information on Channel 16. He says that in the meantime, all of Paria's shipping operations were continuing as normal with berthing ships. He left Paria on Sunday morning. Michael Kurban says that his extended family, including his mother, waited at Paria's main entrance car park, and he was interviewed by Philip Alexander. He says that his family was not informed before the media conference on Sunday that Paria had moved from rescue to recovery, and no one from Paria visited his family before the bodies were recovered. He says that a rescue was possible and that Paria waited out the time, and that Paria's officials should have been on site to respond and not in an office. Michael Kurban believes that a rescue could have occurred. He said that LMCS rescued Christopher, and this gave them hope that everyone was alive. Christopher told them where everyone was and that his father Faisal Kurban was alive and right behind him. Michael Kurban says that even though Christopher was injured, he came out of the pipeline. Mr. Kurban explains that he entered the pipeline and just came back out. He didn't see any reason for Paria to stop them from doing the rescue. He says that Paria waited out the time. Mr. Kurban questions why Paria was having a meeting if they knew that people's lives were at risk. He says that Paria should have been on the site to respond, and that whatever decision was taken should have been taken on site and not from an office. Mr. Kurban further states that LMCS had all of the equipment on site. Mr. Kurban's evidence is that Paria knew about the rescue plan and the equipment because LMC had told them and told this to Catherine what the dive plan was. He says that they did not do this in a document form because these things take time. They wanted a rescue and they didn't need to present any documents for a rescue operation. Mr. Kurban also said that attempts were made to communicate with Paria about the rescue plans through Catherine and through radioing them. Mr. Kurban, is that a fair and accurate summary of your evidence?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Kurban, there's just one thing I'd like to ask you, please. I think you told us in your statement that you had previously dived in a pipeline yourself. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
How long ago was that?
That was on the same job with Christopher Budram.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
On the same job with Christopher Budram and my dad.
You see, you speak very fast.
Yeah, on the same job on berth 6 Christopher Budram was talking about.
Right.
Yeah, that same job.
So on berth 6, when the riser there was being repaired,
yes,
did you dive in the pipe there?
Yes.
So it's a 30-inch pipe, is it?
Yes, it's correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
The same thing that you need to put a gasket on the riser to...
From the inside?
Yeah.
How far into the pipe did you go?
Couldn't estimate that at that time.
Not far?
Not probably about 20 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it, and was that the only time you've been, apart from this occasion, the only time you've been in a pipe?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, all right. Yes, thank you very much. I have no other questions. Does anyone else wish to ask Mr. Kerban any questions? Yes, Ms. Alfonso.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Kerban. My name is Enquiry Alfonso, and I represent the interests of the SWWTU. In paragraph 38 of your statement, your witness statement, that is page 1606.
It's going to be brought to you, Mr. Kerban. It's going to be handed to you.
You see that paragraph, Mr. Kerban?
Yeah.
Could you explain who the we is you're referring to? We repeatedly tried to convince Paria. Who is we?
Means that me, Ronald, Andrew Farah, Dexter.
Okay. And when you say Paria, could you assist me in who in Paria you're referring to?
The Paria personnel that was on site.
Okay. You know any names at all?
No.
No.
That, no.
Okay. Was there a lady by any chance?
Well, at that time, Catherine didn't arrive.
Okay. So you know Catherine Balkiswood?
Well, I knew her that night.
You know, from that night?
Yes.
But you didn't know the other persons, the other Paria personnel?
No, I wasn't on that job, so I don't know the Paria personnel.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And could you also assist me later on in that same paragraph? Paria's plan was to equalize the air. It was not a rescue plan. Paria did not attempt to rescue. So let me just go to that first sentence. Could you assist us in when you say Paria wanted to equalize the air? What did that mean in your mind? What did that mean?
Well, they say they wanted to remove the cap by number 5, the blank. The blank.
I see.
So it means that they wanted to equalize by connecting the riser by number 6 and removing the cap by number 5.
Okay, so that is that's what it meant.
They want to equalize the pressure.
Oh, I see. Thank you very much, because I was a little bit lost when I read that. I thought it was something to pump or something like that. And I just want to be clear, Mr. Kerban, you were able to swim past 2 tanks as far as you could go down into the pipe with the umbilical.
The first tank was on the surface in the pipe.
I see.
Second tank is where you see in the camera.
Okay, and you were able to swim past that?
Yes.
Well, twice?
Once.
In, out, well, once.
Yes.
In, out. Well, okay, so you didn't go past it?
Yes, I passed it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the way out?
Well, yes, I pushed the tank down further and I continue ascending up.
Okay, so you passed it?
Yes.
Twice?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That is all for you, Mr. Kerban. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Oh, I keep...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Afternoon, Mr. Kerban. I wouldn't be long with you. I understand the circumstances, but the pipe that you said that you had entered previously in a previous job, was that, what size of pipe was that? Wasn't it a 50-inch?
I can't be approximately on the size, but it probably was a bigger
a bigger pipe. Because I thought it was 50. Yeah. Was that a dive in which Andrew Farah was involved?
Yes.
Yes, thought so.
Was it on the same occasion?
Yes.
Both you and him had entered that pipe?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
So you could take it from us, it was 50 inches, I think. Yeah.
Let's take it from him that it was 48, since that's the evidence.
40, it's 48.
He says 48.
There's a 48 pipe. Okay. Well, 48 inches or thereabouts. The plan to enter, that's so, you're a commercial diver, right?
Yes.
Are you a saturation diver?
No, I'm not.
But you know that Mr. Bedo is a saturation diver, you know that?
Who's Bedo?
Well, you may know him by Conan Beno,
Yeah.
Bedo.
Yeah.
You know him to be an experienced saturation diver.
Yes.
That, I understand, is one of the highest level of qualifications you can get as a commercial diver. Do you know?
Yeah.
That's correct, right?
Yeah.
When you got, approximately what time you got to the scene?
Approximately 4:30.
4:30. So you were there when Christopher Budham came out?
Well, me, Corey, and Ronald was on site.
Right.
We assisted Corey to come, Christopher out of the chamber.
That's at that time, right? Yeah. At 4:30, yeah, that's it. At 4:30 when you arrived, you weren't at that point being restricted by anyone from entering the pipeline?
At that time, no.
Right. And tell me this, when you later were informed that there was a restriction on entering the pipeline, you understood the restriction was not to enter the pipeline as opposed to the habitat?
Okay, let me explain. When we reach on site, at that time we dived the chamber. We didn't dive the.
Can you move the microphone a little closer?
We dived in the chamber. We didn't dive in the pipeline.
Right.
The second attempt was to go in the pipeline.
The second attempt was to go in the pipeline.
Because when we rescued Christopher.
Right. I understand that there were 5 divers present when you were going to execute a plan. There were Corey, Ronald, Andrew, Dexter Guerra, and yourself.
Correct.
But you said that there were 2 of those persons who were prepared to go into the pipe. 2 of those 5 that I just set out there. 4 and yourself. Who are the 2 that were prepared to enter the pipe?
It was only me was planned to enter the pipe with Corey and Ronald.
With Corey and Ronald.
Assisting me. Not going in the pipe. 2 of them were assisting me.
Beg your pardon?
They was assisting me in the chamber for me
Yes.
to go in the pipe.
Right. So you were the one willing to go into the pipe, or was there any other person?
I was the one willing to go in the pipe.
You were the one willing to go into the pipe. And in fact, you all left topside and went into the habitat to execute that plan to go into the pipe at some stage, right?
That's what we did.
Beg your pardon?
That's what we did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you had gone down there with Mr. Bedo also when he arrived?
That's after.
After, yeah.
After we came back, when I went in the pipeline,
Yes.
came back out
Yes.
with Corey and Ronald,
Yes.
then we execute our next plan with
Right.
Mr. Bedo.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So you went down with Corey and Ronald. You came back up. Then when Mr. Bedo arrived, there was the plan to go to do a rescue, a second attempt.
The second attempt, because the airline, I reached a limit of the airline.
Right. That is down the riser and about 20 feet there about inside.
Approximately 10 to 15 feet.
Oh, 10 to 15, sorry. All right.
So basically, when we came back out, we formulated a plan
Right.
to go a scuba dive.
Right.
That's when Mr. Bedo was involved.
That's when Mr. Bedo was with you.
Yes.
That plan, how were you to execute that plan?
How?
Yeah, what was the plan?
We try to reach a further limit with the scuba tank because we didn't have a limit on the scuba tank.
Yeah, but how you all were, who were to be in the pipe, who were to be in the chamber, who was to be up top side, you remember?
It was Mr. Bedo, Ronald, and myself.
Who were in the chamber?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I supposed to go down in the pipe.
You supposed to go down in the pipe?
Yeah.
Was you the one who volunteered to go down in the pipe at that stage?
At that stage, I was the only one volunteer, and Mr. Berry was there as well.
Yeah. Anyone else had volunteered?
I'm sorry, Mr. Kirban. Can I ask you to move that whole microphone to your left? That's it, yes.
Apart from you, understandably wanted to go into the pipe, was there anyone else at that stage with respect to that plan prepared to enter the pipe?
Well, Mr. Berry was prepared as well.
To go into the pipe?
Yeah.
Yes. That plan, when you all got into the chamber, you all were sitting on the rim of the pipe at that stage?
Not the rim.
Yes.
It was in the chamber.
In the chamber?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around the rim.
Around the rim, yeah.
Not on top of the rim.
Not on top of the rim. But that plan was aborted?
Yes.
By Mr. Who made that call to abort it, Mr. Bedo?
I made that call.
You made that call?
Because when we checked the PSI on the tank that we had, and we estimated the depth and the time to take inside a pipeline, it wasn't enough air. It wasn't enough air in the tank that we had.
It wasn't enough air in the tank that you had, and that's why you all aborted and came back up?
Came back up to ready commercial equipment this time.
Yeah. Mr. Bedo says it a bit differently. And I want to be accurate as to what he said. Mr. Bedo said that he aborted it because he didn't think you were in a sound mind to properly tend him.
Mr. Bedo wasn't in a sound mind?
You. Let me read his full paragraph to you. Michael, Ronald, and I, this is Mr. Bedo. Michael, Ronald, and I then entered the habitat. That's correct, eh? When we entered the habitat, I sat on the rim of the pipeline to enter. And just when I looked at Michael, I take it that's you, he did not look as if he was in a sound mind to properly tend me. I guess that's a diving expression. What is that? What does that mean?
Tend means assist him.
The assist him. So I made a decision. Let's wait until my brother come so that we would be better equipped to enter the pipeline, and we would have better air source as well as communication. So, do you accept, well, you are telling us that the aborting was due only to the shortage of air, but Mr. Bedo is saying, when he looked at you, understandably, because your father was at that stage missing, he did not think you were of sound mind to carry out the exercise.
I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that.
Because three of us made
I'm going to call a halt to this.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. I don't think this is necessary. And I don't think this is necessary.
Very well, sir.
We all understand the position. We understand that there's a diversity of opinion here.
Yes.
But I don't think it's necessary to put that in detail to this witness. I'm very conscious of what Mr. Bedo says.
Very well, sir. I didn't do it gladly, sir, but I had to let him know what Mr. Bedo said as the... So when you, at that stage, when you came back up, before you all went into the chamber on that occasion, where was the plan formulated?
On the badge.
On the badge. Was that plan communicated to the Coast Guard? Did you see them at that stage?
Yeah, there was around.
But at that stage, do you recall if the plan was communicated to them, or you can't remember?
Actually, when it was in the water, It was in the water. When we came back out, Coast Guard told us to come out of the water.
Right.
So we came out. We came on the barge, discussed with them. What we're going to do? What's the plan?
Right.
Coast Guard said they wasn't fit to dive in the pipe. They wasn't trained to dive in the pipe.
They said that they weren't trained to dive in
They
the
said
pipe.
they're not trained to dive in the pipe. So we formulated a plan. As commercial divers, we go with the commercial equipment now in the pipeline.
Do you recall, by chance, if you know, which officers told you that from the Coast Guard?
I don't recall the name.
You don't know any of them
There's
before?
multiple of them, so I can't recall them.
Yeah.
I was more focused on rigging equipment, putting the gear together.
No, I just wondered if you knew any of them before that you were familiar with. But I just want to take you to paragraph 14 of your statement, where you said that a Paria person then responded to you and was telling you that what management was saying. But he said that he knew the situation and do what you want, 14, what you want to do. And you said you understand that to be an unofficial authorization. So he didn't stop you from doing what he thought you wanted to do. Paragraph 14.
No, he didn't stop me.
Right.
But I asked him, who stopped me? Who's telling you to stop me? And he said it was Piper.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him, I said, men have lives at risk. Why Piper telling us to stop, not to go in the pipe?
Right. And he told you, do what you have to do. What I'm trying to get from you is that he didn't tell you cannot go in the water at that stage.
We actually was in the water when I was talking to him.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And that's when you, after that, that's when you went into the hyperbaric, the habitat.
Yes.
Okay. Just move a little bit closer to the microphone.
Is there anything else? What is that? I can't read the hand. Yeah, thanks. Just two more questions, Mr. Kurban. Did you tell anyone from Paria what you had encountered in the pipe when you went down on the 10 or 15 feet? Did you speak to anyone?
Yes, Catherine.
And you told her what you encountered?
Yes.
Right. Do you remember in this series of events at what stage that was?
That is when we came out the water.
When you came out the first time?
The second time.
The second time?
Came out the water. That's when I met Catherine on the barge.
Right.
And they was asking questions. And I had reported Andrew Farah and Dexter instantly.
Right.
So they had probably told Catherine.
No, you can't speculate on that.
So I already, when I came, I talked to Catherine. I explained to them what was the condition of the pipe.
That's when you came out from the water the second time or the first time?
I was in the water all the time. I didn't came out of the water.
Right. No, well, then the hyperbaric chamber. So you went in the chamber, you went down, and you went the 15 feet, and you came back. You came out the chamber. Right. Then you went back into the chamber a second time. It's when you came out that second time, you said that's when you met Catherine.
That is when the Coast Guard let us come out of the water.
That's when?
That is when the Coast Guard let us come out of the water.
Right.
And that is when I talked to Catherine.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Let me see if there's something else. That's all I have for this witness, sir.
Thank you. Anything else? No? Good. Mr. Maharaj? No. I'm pleased to say that is your evidence today. Thank you. We don't need you again. I'm grateful for you coming. I want you to know that certainly everybody over here, and I imagine everybody over there, deeply feel your loss. And I'm very sorry about it indeed. We will get to the bottom of this, I can assure you. All right? Well, thank you very much for coming. You're free to go. You can stay or leave as you please now, and Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break, please. Or should we make it 5? 5-minute break. Yes, thank you. We're going to have next
Mr. Conan Bedo.
Bedo, yes. Thank you, Mr. Maharaj. Mr. Bedo is unavailable on Monday, so we've changed the order slightly, so he's going to be giving evidence now. And that he is going to be the last witness today. So as soon as we all finish with him, we can all go home.
I
Conan Bedo,
solemnly swear that the evidence I shall give to the Commission in this case shall be the truth,
the
whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bedo.
Afternoon, sir.
What we're going to do is, I understand you're not available on Monday. That's why we called you slightly out of turn. All right, well, we're trying to accommodate you. So what's going to happen next is Mr. Bisesar, who sits on the end of the row here, is going to read a summary of your statement, all right? Listen to him carefully. If it accurately reflects that which you have told us, then we need to take it no further. Otherwise, please tell us otherwise, so that we know what you're saying. Then there'll be a number of questions from those who are interested. Hopefully we will get you done today. All right?
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Conan Bedo was interviewed by the legal team and submitted a witness statement dated 27th October 2022. This is at WSB 1241. He said that the facts stated in his witness statement are true and correct to the best of his knowledge, information, and belief. Mr. Bedo was represented by counsel at the interview. Mr. Bedo says that he has been a certified saturation diver since 2017, which is the highest level of diving. Part of his training involved living in a pressurized container on a ship for over 20 days in a confined test. This is the same pressure as if underwater. Mr. Bedo explained that all of the diver courses he had done included rescues as part of the training, and he has worked as a diver in the United States, Guyana, Trinidad, Barbados, amongst other countries. He has worked locally for OTSL, Hull Support, and Trinidad's underwater services, and internationally for Subsea Global, Miami Divers, Sequest Diving, Carl Divers, and S&J Diving. The type of work which he did as a diver, including flanging pipelines, inspection of pipelines, installation of risers, making ties on pipelines, salvage and repairs on pipelines. Mr. Bedo received information of the accident at around 3:37 p.m. on Friday, 25th February 2022, from his brother Conrad Bedo, who is also a commercial air diver, and he arrived at Pointe-a-Pierre at around 5 p.m. He says he knew one of the divers, Faisal Korban, and he had diving equipment and tanks with him. He arrived just as Christopher Boudram was being taken to the hospital, and he said he spoke to Christopher Boudram, who he knew before the accident. He said Christopher told him, "Boy, Conan, go for them boys." And Mr. Bedo told him, I, meaning of course Mr. Bedo, was going. Mr. Bedo says he spoke to Andrew Farah, Michael Kerban, Corey Crawford, he knows him as Corex, and Ronald Ramuta, and together they made a rescue plan by which Mr. Bedo would enter the habitat to make an assessment using rope, while Andrew Farah and another person would be tending the rope from the barge. If Mr. Bedo assessed that he could do the rescue, he would go back in the habitat with Michael and Rory, and he would go into the pipeline using a rope and scuba feet first. He said no one at that stage tried to stop them from going into the habitat or the pipeline. Mr. Bedo entered the habitat and assessed the pipeline, and then gave a thumbs up to the others before he, Michael Korban, and Ronald Ramuta entered the habitat. He looked at Michael and felt that Michael was not in a sound mind to properly assist him, so he decided to wait until his brother Conrad Bedo came to enter the pipeline with better equipment, air source and communications, so they returned to the surface. Andrew Farrer then told him that the Coast Guard said they had to wait, and after about 15 minutes he was told by his brother Conrad that he was at the front gate waiting, and Conrad was also waiting on another vessel with surface supply equipment, umbilicals, and helmets. When Conrad came, they set up the equipment, and it was agreed that Conan would go in feet first and someone would tend the hose. He said he had a 300-foot umbilical. Mr. Beddoe explained to his brother Conrad how it looked in the pipeline. The plan was for Mr. Beddoe to go in feet first and someone would tend the hose. His intention was to go as far as the umbilical would allow. If he didn't feel anything after 300 feet, then there was nothing he could do. If he came into contact with one of the men, the plan was that he would bring him out. The plan was also that if he encountered any obstructions, he would take them out one at a time, as many times as he could. Mr. Beddoe at this time found out that they were not permitted to go into the water because Paria was waiting on the Coast Guard. He said he was not involved in any talks with Paria about the rescue plan at this time, and Andrew dealt with Paria. After 8 p.m., an officer arrived from Coast Guard and spoke to Conrad and Andrew. Andrew told him that they informed the Coast Guard of the rescue plan. Mr. Beddoe also observed that other vessels arrived at the site while he was on the barge. The vessel known as Gulfstream Marine was owned by OTSL, and the vessel known as Waterworld was owned by Subsea Global, used to be called Miami Divers. They arrived to give assistance. They had their full dive spread, which included an unlimited source of air and also other divers. Mr. Beddoe says that the Coast Guard did not render any assistance. They simply arrived and did nothing. He explains that he has done diving in a confined space in the past. He did this at Powergen when he cleaned their salt water intakes, which sucks water from the sea. At 8:30 p.m., Mr. Beddoe went into the habitat with Ronald Ramuta and bolted on the riser extension to prevent any suction happening again. Adam Hollier from the Waterworld in Subsea Global was in the water holding the light for them. Mr. Beddoe stayed on the barge until 8 a.m. Saturday morning, hoping that they would get the go-ahead for the rescue. He then went home and waited all day for a call to rescue the men. He was on standby. His brother Conrad also left at this time. On Sunday morning, Mr. Beddoe accompanied Kazim Ali Sr., Imtiaz Ali, and Andrew Farrer to a meeting with Colin Piper, Mushtaq Mohammed, and a Paria team to discuss LMCS's rescue plan. The rescue plan was more or less the same as before. The difference now was that Paria could not say that there would be another suction event again because the riser was now extended out of the water. Mr. Beddoe's dad, Russell Beddoe, who is also an ADCI diver, was at this meeting. Mr. Beddoe says that in the morning meeting, Colin Piper and others were present on behalf of Paria, which said that it wanted LMCS to submit the rescue plan and that it wanted a risk assessment, a job hazard analysis, and basically a full dive plan that will be required in normal circumstances. Mr. Beddoe says he went back to the office with the LMCS persons who prepared the documents which they showed to him. Kazim Ali Sr., Imtiaz Ali, Andrew Farrer, and Mr. Beddoe returned on Sunday at about 4 p.m. with his father Russell and Mr. Hasib Ali and met with the Paria team where they were eventually advised that Paria was moving from rescue to recovery and would flush the divers out. Mr. Beddoe says that more persons were present at this meeting than the other one. When they got to the meeting, everyone announced themselves. Some persons attended via voice conference. He says that there was a person from the Coast Guard also on voice conference. Kazim Ali Sr. then presented the plan. He says that Krishna Fuentes was one of the divers that Paria had on the video. Mr. Fuentes is also a saturation diver and he's also an IMCA certified supervisor. Mr. Fuentes was asking how LMCS was going about doing the plan and who would be going in, as it would be a voluntary mission, as this is not normal diving. Mr. Beddoe then stepped in and he identified himself to Krishna Fuentes, who knew him personally. Mr. Fuentes told him that he agreed with the plan and had no doubt that Mr. Beddoe could execute the plan, but his only concern was the radiation buildup of hydrocarbons inside the pipeline and what side effects this would have on Mr. Beddoe. This was now a concern to Mr. Beddoe because he never took this into account. Colin Piper said that he did not think that radiation would be an issue. Mr. Fuentes asked whether Paria was willing to guarantee that if any side effects happen to him, that is Mr. Beddoe, within 20 years, whether Paria would be accountable. At this point, everyone went silent. No one from LMCS responded. Mr. Beddoe explains that he was still willing to go into pipeline once Paria had agreed that they would be accountable to him medically if anything were to go wrong 20 years into the future from any radiation. Paria rejected the plan and LMC left. With the exception of Mr. Fuentes, no one said that they had any safety concerns with respect to the plan. However, Mr. Beddoe recalls someone on the video call, as well as the Coast Guard person, saying, "What if the line cut?" However, according to Mr. Beddoe, there was nothing to cut the line. The Coast Guard person asked how LMCS was going to move along the pipeline and recover anything. Kazim Ali Sr. answered these questions, and the JHA dealt with those issues. Mr. Beddoe had the impression that Paria didn't want the rescue, but that they wanted a recovery due to the fact that they were pointing out all the negatives of the plan without actually listening to the entire plan. Mr. Beddoe says he had no hesitation in the plan, and he was fully confident in it. His father, Russell, would have been the standby diver to go in if anything were to happen to him. He had no concerns about going into the pipe. Mr. Beddoe says that there was enough room to go in. Mr. Beddoe concludes that diving is his profession, and he would like to know that should anything happen to him, that there would be other people who would be willing to come and get him back the same way he was willing. Mr. Beddoe, is this a fair and accurate summary of your witness statement?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Beddoe, just a couple of things, please, before I hand you over to others. First of all, at paragraph 26 of your statement, it's going to be handed to you now. Just wait one moment, please.
All right.
This is a little after, I think, 8 o'clock that night,
yeah,
because previous paragraph deals with it at that time. So what we know at this stage is this, isn't it? That a few hours earlier, Mr. Boudram had emerged from the pipe.
Correct.
And you and a range of others were invited to come and see what you could do to rescue.
Correct.
You're a very experienced, highly qualified diver.
To a point, yeah, I would say so, but not really.
Well, you're being, I think, a little modest, if I may say so. The qualifications speak for themselves. What I want to ask you is this. First of all, is there a fraternity amongst divers like yourself working in the commercial diving world?
Yes, we have our association.
Right. And do you know many of the people in this country and elsewhere who engage in this kind of work?
Diving, yes.
Yes. And I imagine it's a relatively small compass of people.
Correct.
And no doubt you would expect, if you were in that situation, others like yourself would come to your aid.
Yeah, I would like to believe so.
And so you answered the call to come and help.
Correct.
Did you know the people that were involved in the pipe?
I've worked with them in the past, yes.
And by the time, I was referring you to paragraph 26 of your statement, in which you say, I observed that other vessels arrived at the site whilst I was on the barge. The vessel known as Gulfstream Marine, owned by OTSL, and a vessel known as Waterworld, is owned by Subsea Global, also Miami Divers. You told us, I think, that you used to work for them as well.
Yeah.
They arrived to give their assistance. They had their full dive spread, which included an unlimited source of air and also divers.
Correct.
So pausing there, please. At this time, around 8 o'clock or so, that evening, a few hours after Mr. Boudram had come out of the pipe, was there anything more that you could have wanted or demanded before entering that pipe to rescue these men?
No.
I mean, in an ideal world, could you have said, give me this and I will go?
We had everything already. We didn't need anything else.
All right, that's the first thing. The second thing is this, please. At paragraph 33, would you turn to that, please? This is now many, many hours later after Mr. Boudram had emerged from the pipe, and one would be forgiven for thinking that perhaps these men may not have survived by now. In any event, this is now Sunday the 27th of February, all right?
Yeah.
And it is in the morning, so something like 36 plus hours after the event happened.
Correct.
Yeah? In the morning, there was a meeting with Colin Piper and others who were present on behalf of Paria, and you attended that meeting.
Yes, I did.
Paria said that they wanted us to orally submit a plan, that they wanted a risk assessment, a job hazard analysis, basically a full dive plan that will be required in normal circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. Now, were these normal circumstances?
No, it's not.
Did you regard that demand as reasonable?
Not exactly.
Well, you better explain what you mean by not exactly.
Because...
Could you turn to that microphone or bring the microphone to you, whichever, yes.
Basically, diving is not physically safe on most instances because we're not designed to be below there.
We're not fish?
No.
Right.
So in this instance, it's entering a pipeline. This is way above normal.
Right.
And we already had everything set to go.
So there is an inherent risk whatever you do?
Regardless what is risk.
Right.
So it's not in the normal practice to enter a pipeline.
Did you not think that given that it was a significant risk for anyone to be asked to enter that pipe, that a demand or a request for a risk assessment, a job hazard analysis, and a full dive plan was not an unreasonable request?
No, I mean, it fairly is, but at the same time, it's a rush. We needed a rush on it.
You need a rush on it?
Yeah, because, I mean, in my instance, I still hoping that they would have been alive.
You were still hoping they would be alive? Well, I dare say everybody was hoping that they would still be alive, but that hope was diminishing quickly.
Correct.
Right. What would you regard as the best possible time within which to operate once you knew Mr. Boudram had come out alive?
The same Friday night.
That Friday night?
Yeah. We already had everything there.
You had everything there?
Yeah.
Do you believe you could have effected a rescue?
I would like to believe so, yes.
On the final day, there was some mention of radiation. Are you aware of this radio? Had you been up until that time?
No.
You'd never heard of it before
No.
then? Have you done any research since?
Not much, just minor little small read up on it.
It's a highly controversial. Do you know whether that's the case or not?
Well, without specific facts, I can't really dig up in it.
I don't dwell on it. All right, thank you very much. There'll be, I suspect, some questions from others. I'm going to ask from the back of the courtroom first, please. Anybody wishes to ask any questions? Ms. Mutu? Mr. Mutu? Then I think it's up to you. Mr. Peterson's going to ask.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bedu, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
You're a saturation diver. First time I heard of the term, but that is the highest qualification of a diver.
Yes, it is.
Very high. And at the meeting on the Sunday, there was another saturation diver, Mr. Fuentes.
Correct.
Yes. You knew him before?
That Sunday? Knew him before, yes.
Yeah, in the industry.
Yes.
You have any reason to doubt his competence in the area of diving?
No.
He is the person who raised the issue of the radiation.
Correct.
Yeah. Did you were hearing about radiation in that context for the first time?
Correct.
Yeah. And did you ask him to elaborate on?
Well, he did. He did elaborate on it.
Because he was saying that was a risk that you all did not factor in.
Correct.
After he elaborated, were you still convinced that he was just being overly cautious, so he didn't know what he was talking about?
No, well, I know him on a personal level, and I don't think he will put my life at risk by just trying to hinder me.
Yes.
For no apparent reason.
For no apparent reason. The Coast Guard was also part of that meeting.
Correct.
And there was some issue about a hazmat diving suit. I don't know what it is.
Well, Fuentes mentioned a hazmat suit.
And he said that they were not in the country.
Yeah.
And it would be too long to bring one in.
But I say it might have take too long to bring.
Oh, you said it would take too long. But did you know if there was any in the country at the time?
Not 100%, but I mean, it still is not something we just use in Trinidad.
It's a rare thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't dive into, we don't have events like this in Trinidad regularly.
No. And it's something will dry rot.
And it's something that will dry rot if it's not used.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard being part of that discussion, did they volunteer to participate in the rescue?
No. They said they're not trained to do that.
They said they're not trained to dive into pipelines.
Correct.
Yeah. From your experience as a saturation diver, which I was impressed when I saw the mode by which you were trained, you know of any other persons in Trinidad qualified to dive into pipelines like that, in that kind of space?
Confined space?
Yes.
A few. A few.
But are those persons also saturation divers?
Some yes, some no.
Yeah. So it's a rare skill.
Yeah.
When you arrived at Paria site that Friday evening, I think you got there around 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You spoke with Christopher Budram, who you saw was just been boarded onto an ambulance.
Correct.
Yes. And he told you that you should go for those guys.
Correct.
Did he tell you anything about the condition within the pipe?
No, we didn't have much conversation because they were checking him out, the medic.
Did he tell you that
I'm struggling to hear you, Mr. Bedo. Please,
sorry.
Just make sure you use that microphone, please. Yeah.
Yes. You didn't have much conversation, but
no.
You realized that he was covered in what appears to be black, thick oil.
Correct.
Yeah. And did that inform an opinion you may at that stage as to what the condition in the pipe might have been?
At the time, I wasn't focused on how he was looking. I was just happy to see that he alive, and he just told me, hey, the rest of them there, go for them.
Did he tell you anything about air pockets at that stage?
No.
Right. How did you get from there out to the boat?
The Coast Guard vessel.
The Coast Guard vessel took you?
Yeah. There was a small craft there.
Yes. And you got out there, and when did you formulate a plan to dive?
When I got out there, probably like about 10 minutes within being there, I spoke with Andrew, I spoke with a couple other guys there, and I got dressed and entered the water just to make an assessment for myself.
And at that stage, the Coast Guard didn't try to stop you?
No.
Neither did any Paria security try to stop
Correct.
you? Yes. And you went into the water and went into the habitat?
Correct.
Yes. You did your assessment?
Yes.
And you came back out?
Correct.
And you reformulated a plan, or you used the same plan?
Well, we reformulated a plan, which is the same rope to 10 the divers down inside.
And then we visited the chamber to execute the plan?
Correct.
And you aborted the plan when...
At that stage, yes.
At that stage. And in the details that were set out, you got the reason why you did not think that Michael could have assisted you.
That is correct.
You have done rescues before?
In school, yes, because we don't get to use this as often. We don't get to do rescues in a real life situation on a normal basis. Before every job, you get to practice a dive.
Oh, you get to...
Yeah.
Right. It's part of your training that persons who are intimately and emotionally involved with a target that you're going to rescue should not be part of the decision-making process?
I would like to say it depends on the situation.
Yes, what do you mean by that?
Because if it is your family in there, you will be a little more hasty, yes, which is what you're saying. But in my case, they are not physically my family. I just know them.
Yes.
But not on a personal level. I just know them. I just do them on a work level.
Yes.
But I still had the drive to go for them regardless.
Yes, no, that's commendable. I'm not attacking that at all. That's understandable. But you have been through drills for rescues?
Yes.
Yeah. And have you ever had a drill with respect to this type of rescue, like in a pipeline or anything that type?
No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you said you went in, you assessed, and you came up and you formulated a plan. Having formulated that plan, did you communicate it to the Coast Guard?
No.
Did you communicate it to anyone apart from
Andrew.
your team? Andrew?
Yeah.
Andrew Farrer,
Farrer.
part of your team?
Yes.
The first time you were speaking to Paria persons would have been when? The Saturday, the Sunday? When?
Sunday.
When you went to that meeting in the morning?
Correct.
With Mr. Kazim Ali Sr.?
Yes.
You got to tell me that thing. I can read. Yeah, well, tell me. I'm asking a minute. Let me make sure I cover all I want to cover. You know your handwriting is not the best. Tell me something. A rescue in something like that 30-inch pipeline, part of a risk assessment would be what size bottles you will use or what source of air you would use.
Yes.
And I saw in your statement you referred to small bottles. What
pony bottle, not actually a pony, it's like a cubic feet smaller. It have the 80 and it have the 50. It has some of them come as 30. We were going with the 50.
All right. That would have been part of your risk assessment.
Yes.
Yes. I think it told the Commission that the request by Paria to have a risk assessment before a dive like that is not unreasonable.
No.
In fact, it's a standard requirement for a dive, especially in a confined space like that.
Yes.
One minute, Mr. Chairman. Right, so I was at the stage where you said the plan was formulated and you had your team and they were ready to go. Having seen earlier the oil on Mr. Bodiram's skin, did you realize that you were diving into a pipe that may have had hydrocarbons?
At the same Friday night, no.
Right.
I wasn't thinking about all that at the time.
Were you aware as to what may have caused the men to enter the pipe?
Well, that will be differential pressure.
Right. Also, you're familiar with what we call delta P?
Yes.
Right. And were you aware that the delta P occurred where an inflatable plug had disappeared into the line?
At the same Friday night, the same said time, no. But it's only after when I entered the water to extend the pipe, I got that from it.
Extend the riser? The
riser, yes.
Which would have eliminated the possibility of any delta P?
Correct.
But earlier in the Friday afternoon when you were formulating the plan to go into the pipe, you did not factor in the possibility of a second...
a second slip, no.
A second delta P, they call it a slip. Right.
What time did the riser went in?
I know. What time did the riser go in to eliminate the possibility of a second event? You remember?
That might have been a little after 10, after 11, somewhere. So it was late.
It was late.
I know it was late already.
It was late already. And you had no idea whether there were any other obstructions within the pipe?
At the time, no. Only when they stuck the camera down inside, I saw it on the video.
Right. Because your initial survey that you said you did when you were formulating the plan did not...
It didn't have anything right there, and the water black. So.
Right. It did not have any...
Floating on the surface.
Any floating on the surface, and it did not enter the pipe at that stage?
No.
Right. So it's only when the camera was inserted and you saw that there was a blockage?
Yeah.
That was Saturday morning?
That would have been when the camera went in, yes.
Yes, around 3, I think it was 3 a.m. It was 3 a.m. It was around 3 a.m. Saturday morning. So you were prepared on Friday night to go in, but you realized what I just went through there, with a set of risks, you would have been going in without those risks being addressed.
Yeah, but you will take them out one by one as normal, the same way.
You'll take out?
Whatever would have been blocking it. Right. Because for it to enter, it must be able to come back out.
Yes, I know, I take that. That is the execution of the plan. But what I'm saying is that when you formulated the plan, all those factors I just pointed out to you, the hydrocarbons, the possibility of the plug being in the line, the possibility of a second event, the blockage, all those factors, those are risk factors you would accept?
Yeah, at the time, at the Friday night, yes.
Yeah, but those weren't factored in your earlier plan because you weren't aware of them?
Correct.
No, the same point you made. Yeah. I know. You're not easy, you know. As part of that, one of the risks, you did not have any idea as to how well, I know it's an obvious question, but we need to get it to the record. You did not know how the men were positioned in the pipe.
Correct.
And your plan to rescue them took into account what any particular position the men may have been in?
At the time, no.
Yeah.
Because at the time was more preservation of life.
If they were heading first, it would have been more difficult than if they were feet in first.
Correct.
Yeah. I saw something curious from Mr. Fuentes' comment at the meeting on the Sunday. He was asking how we are going to do the plan and who will be going in, and he said it would be a voluntary mission. What do you mean by that?
Because at the time you have to volunteer to go inside a pipeline. There is not something that no company has ever hired anyone to enter a pipeline.
Yeah, because he said it was not a normal diving.
Correct.
Right. I think that's it. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Bedo, for your time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have one question for Mr. Bedo. Thank you. Mr. Bedo, was there any significance of the fact that Mr. Boudram was alive in operation of your mind when you had planned on going in for the dive, the rescue?
On the Friday night?
On the Friday night.
On the Friday night, I didn't actually think much about the dangers of it. I was just more seeing it as an ex-diver inside there in assistance.
Right.
That needed assistance.
But what I'm asking you, the fact that Mr. Boudram, you said you saw
Yes, I saw him.
You saw Mr. Boudram. And the fact that he was alive. And you saw him, did that operate in your mind to any significance?
Yeah, that would mean that the other guy is still alive, because if he came out, the others would be there. And then he said, go for them. So in other words, he would like to believe that they're right there too.
Thank you.
So.
All of the issues that Mr. Peterson has raised with you that you didn't consider, you've been frank enough to tell us on the Friday night, such as the possibility of another Delta P, the oil hydrocarbons that were inside there, and so on. You remember he was asking you about those.
Yeah.
You knew that Mr. Boudram had come out of the pipe.
Correct.
And was alive.
Yes.
And did you know that the other divers were said to be in air pockets within the pipe?
At the Friday night, no.
So you hadn't acquired that information that others were in air pockets?
At the Friday night, no.
What did you think they were breathing?
Well, the scuba bottles would have gone in with them, and the volume of air would have been trapped somewhere. I was hoping that it would have, but I didn't guarantee it. I didn't even heard about it before.
Did you know how long Mr. Boudram had been in the pipe?
Probably like an hour. I assuming.
Do you know now?
Not exactly, no.
Do you know that it was 2.5 hours?
2.5?
Yes.
No, I didn't.
With the best diver in the world, could he last on one tank for 2.5 hours?
No.
No. Even no matter how shallow you breathe.
Correct.
But you didn't know that at the time?
No.
Your natural instinct was, I'm a diver, they're divers, let me help.
Yes.
That was it, wasn't it?
That is correct.
And you wouldn't be surprised that there were others at Paria and so on who were saying, hold on a minute, we need to take stock before you go charging in there. You wouldn't be surprised about that, would you?
No.
No. However, there came a time when you did know more.
Yes.
And there came a time when there were a good deal more professionals on site.
Yes.
Did you have in your mind at any point in time, even now looking back on it, any doubt that you might have been able to effect a successful rescue?
The Friday night, looking back at it now, I still would have gone.
Yeah. There's one other thing I want to ask you. Yes, this. You may have been persuaded because of some argument about potential radiation not to enter the pipe. I don't think you necessarily are saying that, but even if you were persuaded not to enter the pipe, were there other divers who were prepared to enter the pipe?
I didn't speak to anyone else about if they were willing to go in the Sunday after.
No,
when we heard about
before that, up until that time. I mean, were you the only volunteer?
I don't know. I didn't ask much about that. I didn't ask much people.
You just volunteered yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Anything else? No? Thank you very much. You're free to go. Thank you for coming. Now, yes, thank you very much. Bye-bye. I understand we still have Mr. Ramutar. Is there any reason why we can't try and dispose of this witness today? Let's have Mr. Ramutar, shall we? Let's do our best. Do you think you're likely to be lengthy with him? What I don't want to do is to call him, then not have him back until Monday with a 3-day break, bearing in mind what happened today. Yes.
Yes, you could probably try to get it. Yes, let's have him.
Oh, good.
Because he doesn't add anything.
Thank you for that, Mr.
It's a repetition of areas we have covered before.
Volume 4.
I,
Ronald Ramuta,
solemnly swear that the evidence I shall give to the Commission in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes. Do take a seat. Now, it's very important that when you do speak, you lower that microphone down so it's level with your mouth and bring it a little closer to yourself. That's perfect. Right. Now, what's going to happen now is Miss Maharaj, who sits there, is going to be summarizing your evidence that you've given, all right, in your statement. That will serve as your evidence in chief. Will hopefully save us a little time. Please listen carefully to her summary, all right? And if you disagree with it, tell us at the end. She's going to read that to you now. We're expecting to dispose of your evidence today so that you'll be able to go and won't have to return unless you want to, when you're allowed to sit at the back of the court, all right? But for now, pay attention to what she has to say. Am I right in understanding you're known as Rolly?
Yes.
Right, okay, thank you. Right, Miss Maharaj.
Thank you. Mr. Ramuta attended an interview with the Commission and a witness statement was prepared for him. He reviewed and signed his witness statement on the 31st of October. His witness statement is at the Witness Statement Bundle, page 1610, Volume 4. Mr. Ramuta is a certified commercial diver. He was the brother-in-law of Faisal Kurban. At about 5:20 p.m. on the 25th February, Mr. Ramuta arrived at Paria's compound and headed to Boot 6 with Michael Kurban and Corey Crawford to assist in rescue efforts of the missing divers. When they arrived at Boot 6, they were told multiple times by Paria personnel that they did not have permission to enter the water. At this point, Mr. Ramuta stated that he still wasn't sure if the divers were in the pipeline or in the water. Mr. Ramatar stated that Michael Coburn and Paria personnel had a few words back and forth, but he, Mr. Ramatar, and Corey Crawford entered the water. Corey Crawford and Michael Coburn proceeded with caution to the hyperbaric. Corey Crawford and Mr. Ramatar proceeded with caution to the habitat. They entered the chamber and heard a voice calling and a knocking sound. Mr. Ramatar climbed into the habitat. He looked into the pipeline and saw Christopher covered in oil. Christopher got scared when he saw him and pulled back. He asked, "Who is you?" Mr. Ramatar bent down and told him his name. Mr. Ramatar then tried to pull him up, but he was too slippery. Corey Crawford came into the habitat at this time, and they both assisted Christopher out of the pipeline. Christopher kept telling him that Faizi was right behind. Corey Crawford took Christopher to the surface, but Mr. Ramatar remained in the habitat for about 10 minutes to see if anyone was coming out of the pipeline. He tapped the pipeline with a 4-tap emergency using the chain block, and he felt a vibration of 4 taps coming back from inside the pipeline. He repeated this code a few times, and every time he got the same response. Mr. Ramatar then went back to the surface, and he and Michael and Corey decided to go into the pipeline, since at this point they knew that everyone was in the pipeline because Christopher said they were in an air pocket. They then returned to the habitat with a dive tank with a hose on it called a hooker. Mr. Crawford and Mr. Ramatar assisted Michael Coburn into the pipeline. They held the dive tank, and Michael Coburn entered the pipeline with the hooker. He went as far as he could until he reached the limit of the hooker. Mr. Ramatar and Mr. Crawford thugged him to let him know that the hooker had reached its limits. When he came back out, Michael Coburn told him that he reached a little after the elbow and saw nothing. He didn't take anything out of the pipeline. Another diver, known to Mr. Coburn as Conan, arrived at the site. Michael, Conan, and Mr. Coburn decided to go back into the habitat. The new plan was that Conan and Mr. Ramatar would assist Michael Coburn into the pipeline with 1 tank and with 2 regulators and 2 second stage, so that 2 persons could breathe out of the same tank. However, in the habitat, Michael Coburn wasn't feeling comfortable, and they decided to abort. According to Mr. Ramatar, they then proceeded to the surface and started making phone calls to get other divers and other equipment. At about 7:30 p.m., Mr. Alvin Sitaram from Subsea Global arrived with his vessel, which was fully equipped with commercially equipped diving gears, such as hats and a hose with communication and camera. A rescue dive was planned with the commercial equipment. Conan volunteered to go inside the pipeline with commercial equipment. However, when they were about to start the dive, they were told by Paria officials to wait until the Coast Guard arrived. The Coast Guard came around after 8 p.m., and after they were briefed by Paria officials, the Coast Guard indicated that they did not have equipment to go inside because they were not trained for that. Mr. Ramatar stated that he and the other divers decided to stick to the rescue plan, but they were told by Paria officials that they didn't have permission to go into the pipeline and use the Coast Guard to stop them. According to Mr. Ramatar, the Coast Guard was armed and told them that they couldn't go into the pipeline. Mr. Ramatar stated that LMCS, as well as Michael and Corey, tried on several occasions to convince the Paria personnel and the Coast Guard for permission to do the rescue by giving them details of the rescue plan. However, they said no. Later on Friday, the 25th February, Mr. Ramatar assisted in works to connect the riser at Berth 6. He says this was done at about 10:30 p.m. He stated this was done to open the riser at Berth 5, as there were reports that knocking was being heard at Berth 5. Mr. Ramatar stated that he was present when Paria inserted cameras into the pipeline in the early hours of Saturday, 26 February. On Saturday, Mr. Ramatar attended a meeting with Paria and the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. After the meeting, he went back to Berth 6, but nothing was happening. He left that evening and returned on the morning of Sunday, the 27th February. On Sunday evening, he saw Paria's media conference where it was announced that Paria was now moving to a recovery. He was present on Sunday, the 28th, on LMCS's vessel whilst the recovery efforts were ongoing. On Monday, the 28th, Paria officials came with special forces at Berth 6 and requested LMCS personnel to leave. LMCS personnel refused and their phones were taken from them, but Paria asked that LMCS Sunny Davy moved to a different location, and when they arrived at this new location, Paria put tarpaulin in front of where they were going to conduct work to block LMCS off from seeing what they were doing. Mr. Ramata says that LMCS was able to position the boat to try to see the recovery efforts, and he saw when bodies were retrieved. Mr. Ramata stated that based on the information Christopher gave, he believes that the rescue plan would have worked. He says Michael entered the pipeline feet first, and if he had gotten into difficulty, the hose was tied to him, and Mr. Ramata and others could have assisted by pulling him back out with the hose. He says the process of Michael going in and out of the pipeline took about 5 minutes. Mr. Ramata, is that an accurate summary of your evidence?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Ramata, it hasn't escaped me that Faisal Kurban was your brother-in-law, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes. So please accept our condolences. All right.
Thank you.
And I know this can't be easy. So let me just ask you a couple of questions, please. First, one thing is for sure, isn't it, in your own mind, is that when Mr. Boudram emerged from that pipe, there was at least one other person who was alive, because you were tapping on that pipe and he was tapping back.
Correct.
So in your mind, there was no question that there was at least one other person alive.
Yes.
And Mr. Boudram had told you Faizi, your brother-in-law, was right behind him.
Yes.
Yes, I don't think there's anything else I need to ask. Does anybody? I'm going to ask at the back of the court first. Does anybody need to ask Mr. Ramutar any questions? No. All right. Thank you. Well, Mr. Peterson.
Just a few questions. Afternoon, Mr. Ramutar.
Good afternoon, sir.
You saw when your colleague, Mr. Bedo, arrived at the location?
What's the first name of that?
Bedo, Mr. Bedo. Conan.
Well, I didn't actually see it when he arrived, but the first time I saw him, he was in the water.
Oh, he was in, okay.
What you need to do is, you see that microphone in front of you, move it right to your left. A little more. A little bit more. Thank you. Right, now when you turn to face Mr. Peterson, yes, we'll hear you.
At that time, was it dark or it was just dusk?
Dusk.
Yeah. The Coast Guard was already there?
Yes, Coast Guard vessel was there when I arrived also.
Which is what, 5:20? Thereabouts?
Yeah, well, no. Well, I arrived on the boat or closer to 6 minutes to 6.
And the vessel was already there?
Yes.
The Coast Guard vessel was already there. Did they prevent you from going into the water at that point?
No.
Did any security from Paria prevent you from going into the water at that point?
There was only words. They were just telling us we don't have permission.
But you all, you ignored that anyhow, and you all were diving?
Yes.
When Mr. Bedo arrived, you all put a plan together to attempt a rescue?
Yes.
And you attempted to execute that rescue, but you aborted it at some point?
Yes.
You weren't working with LMCS at that time, you were working with Neptune?
Yes.
That's another diving company?
Correct.
Yeah. One of the specialist companies that came was Subsea Global?
Yes.
Were they prepared to dive?
Yes.
Yeah. Who from that company had joined your plan to dive, if any?
Well, Mr. Conan also work with them. So
he works with them.
He's we freelance with different companies.
Okay. And Mr. Conan was the person you're talking about from Subsea who was prepared to assist in the dive?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Among with other divers.
Among with other divers, but from other companies?
Yes.
What about the Coast Guard? Did anybody discuss with them the ability to assist in diving?
Well, we were told, when we told Paria about our plan, they told us to wait on the Coast Guard divers this time. The Coast Guard was there, but the divers, Coast Guard divers was not there. So they told us to wait on the Coast Guard divers. And when the Coast Guard divers arrive, they said they're not trained for that, to go down,
To go down in, because at that point,
we knew there was inside the pipeline.
You knew right. And you would be able to tell them the size of the pipeline, the possible conditions of the pipeline.
Yes.
And you formed the view as to the conditions in the pipeline based on what you saw when Christopher Bodram was rescued.
And what he told me, yes.
And what he told you, because you were the one who assisted in taking him at the head of the pipe out of the chamber.
Yes.
Right. And having seen Mr. Bodram, you saw him covered in what appeared to be oil.
Yes.
So you know that at least one of the hazards in that pipe would have been the oil, presence of oil.
Yes.
Right. Also, you knew about delta P factor.
Yes.
And you understood at that stage, did you understand that that could have been a possible reason how your colleagues ended up in the pipe?
Yes.
Right. So you know that, did you also know that there was possibility that the equipment would also be in the pipe?
Yes.
And did you know the possibility from that delta P event that there could have also been a plug, an inflatable plug in the pipe?
Yes.
Because you have done this kind of work before?
Yes.
Right. And you also knew, apart from the inflatable plug, apart from the equipment, that you did not know how many persons might have been particularly in the pipe, or you thought all the men were in the pipe?
Christopher told us all the men were in the pipe.
Christopher told you all the men were in the pipe. Have you ever done any rescue close to that or anything like that?
Well, we train for rescue in confined space. When we're doing the course, yes. Part of our course is training for confined space rescue and stuff.
Right. So you will describe that pipeline as a confined space.
Yes.
But in this case, with added hazards like the presence of oil, the equipment in the line. You had to say yes, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. And one more thing, you said you were familiar with the concept, the principle of the delta P factor.
Yes.
Did you also consider that there could have been a possible second event?
Well, yes, but at that time, life, saving life was more important.
Yeah, all right. So that's what I want to know. So you considered it, but you chose that life is. Yes. That's okay. Anything else?
Is the evidence that he never conducted a rescue before?
He said so. He said so.
Well, he said he trained, he didn't.
Sorry, I thought you had answered it. I asked you about whether you had conducted such a rescue before. You said you were trained to conduct confined space, but I asked you if you ever participated in an actual rescue of that kind.
Not inside a pipeline.
Not inside a pipeline. But confined space rescue?
Yes.
Right. Where? Could you tell us what circumstances, not the exact particulars?
Well, inside vessel. I mostly deal with salvage and vessels, ships, sunken ships, something, and
yes.
Guys got stuck inside and we went to rescue them.
Right. Is there anything else? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think Mr. Wilson has a question.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Ramata. I'm hearing about your training in terms of confined space, but are you aware of the difference in diving in a pipeline, if any at all, if you're aware of it?
No.
I offer you that diving in a pipeline is called penetration diving, or penetration diving. So it might be slightly different than confined space. Have you ever trained for diving and or rescue in penetration diving?
Well, no.
No.
Not inside pipeline.
No. Not inside pipelines. All right. Your commercial diving ticket, it's to a known standard or from an accreditation body, right?
Repeat that?
Your commercial diving ticket, it's from a known a diving body, a
Yes.
trade association with accreditation. And that trade association, there are stipulations into the methodologies of diving throughout and how you execute diving safe work scopes.
Yes.
Right. In your training in the accredited training site, did you ever come across, I kind of repeated myself about getting to something. Did you ever come across penetration diving?
But you know the pipeline, right?
Yes.
Well, no.
Well, no. In your experience as a commercial diver then, removing the standards, have you ever made penetration dives?
I made one, yes. I made penetration diving inside pipeline, this, because same way in vessel. Had the pipeline, we went into the pipeline to see what is inside the ending.
At that time, were you diving to a known standard or a standard was absent?
Well, probably standard was absent.
Standard was absent. Thank you. That's all.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Maharaj, anything? No? Well, I think we made the right decision. Thank you very much indeed for coming, Mr. Ramat. As I say, you have our condolences. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. All right. We'll call it a day. You may do. Well, that's the conclusion of this week. I did indicate previously that we would entertain any question that there might be from the media. If there is any query, given the hour, I suggest you come and ask me later.
Mr. Chairman, I have two housekeeping matters. Please.
Of course.
We have the pathologists, the experts, the pathologists' reports. We would like to formally, well, we did inquire as to whether we could have gotten images, notes, photographs, or any video recording of their examinations. But that request will have to come from the commission to those pathologists to provide it, because they're the...
What is it exactly you want? Have you written and asked us for this?
Yes, we did. Yes.
Just a minute. Well, what I'm proposed to do is this. I understand you have written and asked us to obtain it. I will effect a further request. Do you want them from both pathologists for all four bodies?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We would like to consult. We like to consult our expert to give us assistance, and they have requested that they need, in order to fully advise us, that material, which I'm advised in the examination of a post-mortem examination. It's a standard thing that notes, videotapes, slides, photographs would have been taken. So that, together with the report, would assist our expert.
I'm very sensitive, obviously, to photographs of those who have died being used for any purpose other than what is strictly necessary in the process that this inquiry is engaged in. What I am prepared to do, you say you have an expert. What expert? Is he another pathologist?
We are seeking expert advice from pathologists.
Right.
And that is what they would need in order to... Because apart from that, they just have the reports.
I understand, Mr. Peterson. What I'm going to suggest is this, is that if you give us the name of the pathologist that you want to examine the records obtained by the existing pathologists in this case, what I will do is to arrange for those pathologists to pass the material to your pathologist. You don't need them, unless you can persuade me that you do for some reason. It seems to me, if it's a matter of experts, why is it necessary for you to have pictures?
Well, because... So, well, we have to get advice. We have to consult with our expert, and we will need to cross-examine or examine our experts with respect to the reports and the expert. So the point is that if those are given to us as counsel in the matter, we will give an undertaking that they will be used between the experts.
No, I'm sure that that's right, Mr. Peterson. I'm not suggesting that anything other than that, but you'll appreciate that the families of those who have died will be a little sensitive to the company who they may hold in some way responsible for their death is now poring over pictures of the bodies, and I want to be sensitive to that. And insofar as it is strictly necessary for your pathologist to have additional information, I don't wish to in any way prevent you from having that information if it's going to provide assistance to us. But I am anxious to understand precisely why it is necessary to have video footage or photographs and or the notes of pathologists in your hands if your pathologist is going to give you an opinion. Presumably you have the questions that you already have in your mind for him to give you an opinion on.
I have those too, sir, but when I'm consulting with our expert, we will be in a conference and he would be pointing out it and we will be interrogating his conclusion if it's different from the experts.
Right.
But without that, so I'm sorry about, yeah.
Mr. Peterson's all right. But
you have a undertaking that it will be kept solely for the purpose.
Well, I think I want a slightly more restrictive undertaking. I have no difficulty with you and Mr. Mutu having sight of this material, but I would like to restrict it to you two. Is there any reason why that shouldn't apply?
No, sir. We had planned to keep it to us and our expert, as opposed to even the
I think if we can restrict it to you two,
and our expert,
and you're obviously your expert, yes. Yeah. But you two, as part of the team, I'll agree to that, and I will arrange for, insofar as I'm able, such notes as may exist or photographs that may exist for you two, together with your expert. All right?
Thank you, sir.
And I take it that you will make sure that that is positioned, and I know you will. All right.
And the second
yes.
request is we are on course to comply with my undertaking to this commission with respect to the outstanding
IMT notes,
videos, WhatsApp material. We got the jump drive and we'll be on.
Well, I think what we've asked for at the moment is the notes from the IMT.
Yes, and also communication, electronic communication.
Well, all communications that were taking place that were part of the process between the various parties at the IMT.
Yes, that's what I understand. Yeah. That's the undertaking we gave, that it will be available by tomorrow. But so we have a request, in fairness to our clients, if you can also request from LMCS the communication with respect to that evening, where after the occurrence of the event at 2:50, between Friday the 25th and Sunday the 27th. WhatsApp communication, emails communication, and or notes, so, because we can't do it ourselves.
So you're asking me to obtain from LMCS their WhatsApp communication. Do you know that there was any?
So that's, well, it's, if there are communication, I will not know that, sir, but the request is always, and that's
well, it's a very wide, I'm not sure how I can deal with it. If you're saying there's a fundamental difference, isn't there, between an IMT, which is a requirement that automatically engages in a tragedy such as this, where there are communications between the members of that IMT, and minutes to be kept at meetings, notes to be kept, and if you choose to use a telephone to do it by way of WhatsApp messages, well, that's a matter for you, or for the IMT. That is very different from communications between individuals at the completely separate company who don't have any legal obligation to create an IMT or any obligation to keep a particular note. I mean, I'm not sure what you're asking.
No, sir, but contractually, in this matter, LMCS are the first call emergency responders, and Paria contractually was to be the second tier. So that's what we are after. What was the communication with respect to LMCS, with respect to engaging that emergency provision under the emergency plan, which is contractually obliged to provide in the course of this contract?
Communications between whom?
Between members of LMCS, sir. Because we heard that there were supervisors, there was the diving supervisors, there was Mr. Ali, and all of that. We want to see what was the response at that time with respect to this incident.
I have to say I'm extremely reluctant to make some sort of order that's going to disclose potentially personal types of information, concerns that exist between family members. I don't know what the bounds of what you're asking me are. Can I put it in this way? Look, given the
Mr. Chairman, I had that concern too, that I don't want to know who loves who, but there's the redacting process to that, and also when we are disclosing emails, we are scrubbing them to see if they're purely irrelevant material.
Yes, well, I don't want anything that's irrelevant, obviously, yes. But I am concerned about drafting any kind of order that would meet what you're asking me for. So what I'm going to do is this, Mr. Peterson. I suggest that since this is the first you've raised of it, and here we are in the end of the second week of these hearings, that you put into writing the nature of the order that you would wish me to make.
Sure.
You draft it, send it to me via Ms. Sinanan, and then we will consider it. There's no reason why we can't correspond, as we have done, by email, and if I feel it's fair, then I will make that request. But at the moment, I'm not prepared to make any kind of order until I see exactly what it is that you're after.
Sure, sir.
All right.
But the request, I guarantee you, will be a fair one.
Sure. All right. Well, you've heard what Mr. Peterson has been saying, Ms. Prasad Maharaj, and we'll see what comes my way. All right, and then I'll obviously engage with you on that. Are there any other housekeeping matters that I need to attend to before we break off for Monday? No? Marvellous. Well, look, thank you all very much for your cooperation this week. Much has been learned, I hope, and I hope that the public generally have been both interested, intrigued, and informed by what we've heard this week. So thank you all, and I will see you all on Monday. Apparently we're not finished. Start time on Monday, and it's being suggested 9:30. It's not going to be 9:30.
We suggested that, Mr. Sinanan. Is that Mr.
Relax,
Sinanan?
Mr. Peterson. I shan't be flying in, unfortunately, until nearly midnight on Sunday night, so I can assure you it won't be 9:30. We'll say 10 o'clock, shall we?
Yes.
10 o'clock. Thank you.
Ramesh, is you.